Chapter 2, A Stormy Beginning. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Prologue I. Oliver Ford Davies. Maester Cresson, Oliver Ford Davies. It's over. At long last, it is over, Cresson thought as he watched as Stannis ride with a contingent of soldiers, whilst leaving the remainder to guard Storm's End and protect his younger brothers. Maester Cresson, where is Stannis going? Renly asked as he and the youngest of the sons of Steffon Baratheon and Cassina Estermont walked up the battlements to see him. He is going to King's Landing now, Renly. Now that your brother is king, Stannis must swear fealty to him as our new king, said Cresson, bending down to be face to face to the second youngest of his charges. And pray that he rebuilds the realm well. Well, at least officially it will be him, but unofficially it will be whomever he chooses to be hand. Cresson knew the Baratheon brothers well enough to know that Robert had little patience for the mundane matters of stewardships and ruling. He was born to be a warrior. He may have become a great warrior in killing Rhaegar Targaryen and crushing the great Targaryen dynasty underneath his boot, but he wasn't born to rule. He may have become a good Lord Paramount of the Stormlands if he was well advised and had a good lady wife. But, being a king, never was there a man more ill-suited than he. But better he than the Mad King. Will we see Robert again? Renly asked. Of course you will, my dear boy. Of course you will. But you must understand, being a king will not be easy for your brother. He will need the help of Stannis and the help of both of you if he is to become a good king, said Cresson with a kindly smile. I will do all I can to help him rule well and be a good king, Maester, said an eager Renly. Cresson beamed at how sweet he was. But what truly made him happy was seeing Renly happy again. However, the same couldn't be said for Stannis and their youngest brother. When Robert was sent to Jon Arryn as his ward, that had left him to raise the other three sons of Lord Steffon and Lady Cassina. Renly was a bright-eyed and joyful young boy, always so happy and always made friends with everyone he met. Stannis wasn't an easy boy to raise, especially after the ship of Steffon and Cassina sank and they drowned off Shipbreaker Bay. Both Robert and Stannis bore witness to the terrible event and it affected them both, even if they hadn't realized it. Robert, before he left for the Eyrie to foster under Jon Arryn, he turned to drinking, fighting, hunting and spending too much time with girls and women. Cresson was sad that he lost none of these habits from his time in the Vale or afterwards. And yet, Cresson recognized these as his ways of coping of losing his parents at so young an age. As for Stannis, he coped by abiding by to his duty, by the law and by honor. For these three things were absolute and he grew up to be a man whom would make no compromises. Also he could make his parents proud, Cresson felt, though Stannis would never admit to it or say otherwise. For that, and other things, Cresson treated Stannis as the son he never had, for he always turned to him for advice on everything. Whether it was talking with people, giving speeches to small folk or helping raise his younger brothers, he would always turn to Cresson. Now that Robert is king, will he destroy the Tyrells? Eagerly asked Elgadas. Not that I know of, said Cresson as he turned to the youngest of his charges. The war is over, Robert has won and is king now. We don't need to worry about that, brother, said Renly. They've starved us for a whole year, Renly. They are bad and as evil as the Mad King, snapped Elgadas. Even at 5, Elgadas is a frightening boy. If he was the eldest of the Baratheon brothers, I think he would become a Lord Paramount that would be ruthless in times of war but pensive in times of peace. He may have even earned a place on the small council. Indeed, throughout the siege, every morning after a small morning meal, Elgadas would stand out on the walls and look down on the Tyrell besiegers with a look of deep loathing and would spout hatred before spending the whole day practicing fighting with a sword in one hand and an axe in the other. He never spent time making friends like Renly had done. Come, brother. Let's get you some food and cheer you up, said Renly, putting his arm around Elgadas and taking him back to the Round Tower. Poor Elgadas. He never knew his parents like his brothers do, and even Renly remembers them. He has grown up as the only one out of the 150 on board the Wind Proud that survived when it crashed during the storm. Only a babe, a few days old. Born during a treacherous storm at sea on Steffon and Cassina's return voyage home from Essos. Many call him the Stormborn for being born during a storm, and others say it was the gods who saved him from the sinking which killed his parents. Others say that being a Baratheon born during a storm was a sign that he was destined for great things. I hope that is not his path in life. I only wish for him to be happy. Prologue 2. Kudus Fati Isila had in EUBTV time. Young Jon Bronze Jon Royce, as Andalune. Jon Royce, Lord of Runestone, stood in court in the throne room of the Red Keep to see his old friend return from Dorne. You return, Ned. Not alone, I see, said the king, seated on the Iron Throne, gesturing to Ned's wife, Ashera Dayne. King Robert. Gods, it feels so long ago that he, Ned, Kyle, Elbert, Brandon and I would annoy Lord Arryn with our antics on the training grounds at the Eyrie and in Harrenhal at the tourney. But now they are gone. Brandon. Elbert. And Kyle, Jon thought as he looked down at his feet and remembered hearing the news of how Kyle, his younger brother, was murdered by order of the Mad King for no other crime than that of being a companion of Brandon Stark when he demanded that Rhaegar face him for kidnapping Lyanna Stark. Your Grace, said a grim and quiet Ned. I'm so sorry, Ned. Lyanna was the most wonderful of women, said the king mournfully. I met Lyanna only once. A wild and beautiful girl, indeed. But not even she was anything like Ned's wife here right now, and, I guess, our soon-to-be queen. She was, said Ned sadly. A very sad time, Lord Stark. You have our deepest condolences, said the uncrowned queen, Cersei Lannister, whom was soon to wed the new king. She stood next to the king as he was seated on the Iron Throne. There can be no doubt she is beautiful. Almost as beautiful as Ashera Dayne. But I see how she smiles. It's a mama's smile and well-trained also. And I see cruelty in her eyes, as green as wildfire. Robert will be no mad king, but will she be a mad queen? Your Grace, if I may, asked Tywin Lannister. Speak, my lord, said the king, gesturing with his large and muscular arm. What is to be done with Princess Elia and the Targaryen children, asked Tywin Lannister. Do you intend to try and have them murdered again, Lord Lannister? I heard the story from Ned, how your men Clegane and Lorque tried to rape and murder them, defenseless women and children, before Ned, Howland, Mark, Willam, Jorah, Theo and Martin killed them. Jon noticed how the Kingsguard knights whom had sworn service to Robert, and had formerly served the Mad King, looked at Tywin with a dark fury. Arthur Dayne, Drold Hightower, Oswell Went and Barristan Selmy all reached for their swords, as if ready to cut down the Lord of Casterly Rock. Arthur Dayne's magnificent greatsword, Dawn, glowed radiantly as the blade was half unsheathed. Their sworn brother, Jaime Lannister, stared with shock at his father for his words, but naturally did not reach for his sword. It would be best for the realm, my love, if something was done with them, said Cersei Lannister, smiling poisonously at her soon-to-be husband. I cannot believe that such a thing is even being discussed. We were supposed to have stopped such horrific crimes from being committed when we removed the Targaryens. They are infant children, Robert, who have done no wrong whatsoever. Are you so keen to bloody your hammer with the blood of innocents? Ned demanded as he reached for his Valyrian steel greatsword, Ice, whilst his men started to protectively surround Princess Elia, Princess Daenerys and Elia Martell's children. Jon was not surprised to hear that from Ned, even regarding the circumstances. The Targaryens murdered his brother and his father, and Rhaegar's kidnapping of his sister ultimately led to her death. He is doing the right thing in not calling for their deaths like these cowardly Lannisters, but what will he do, if King Robert does order that they be murdered? What are you doing, Ned? The king demanded. They will not be harmed. Not Princess Elia, Daenerys, Rhaenys or Aegon. They have committed no crimes, Ned all but shouted with his frightful and thundering voice. Quiet wolf indeed. He is frightful when he is furious. Ashera Stark, whom held their son Artos in her arms, looked fearfully at her husband for what the king may say or do. Jon looked around and saw the Targaryen children and Martell princess, under close guard of Ned's closest friends and companions, including the two Crownlander knights whom swore to protect the Targaryen children. You would let them live? After what her husband did to your sister, he demanded as he pointed at Elia, who stood her ground and did not look away or look ashamed of something she was not responsible. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, like all Martells. After what her father did to your father and your brother, he continued as he pointed at Daenerys, who lay in a bassinet being held by young Jory Castle whilst Ashera Stark stood side by side with Elia Martell. And what fucking good does it do to punish the innocent for the crimes they were not responsible? Is an infant child responsible for the crimes of its father? Or are you all fucking stupid enough to think otherwise? Ned demanded as he looked around at the entire courtroom for those fools who dared to support action against the infant Targaryens and Elia Martell. And what if loyalists try to start a war in their name, Lord Stark? What is the lives of 3 children against many thousands of lives should such a war begin, said Grand Maester Pycelle. You disgusting old shit piece of a worm, Jon thought as he reached for his sheathed greatsword, Lamentation. Lamentation was the Valyrian steel greatsword of House Royce, once thought to be lost in King's Landing until its discovery during the search for wildfire left behind by the Mad King's attempt to burn the city. Lamentation was wielded by Sir William Royce during the storming of the Dragon Pit in the year 130 AC until its disappearance. Not even a day after it was in the hands of a Royce of Runestone again, Tywin Lannister tried to buy it from Jon for 1 million gold dragons. An offer he blatantly refused, and he made it no secret his distaste for Tywin Lannister during the talk. I will take them with me to Winterfell. I will raise the children as I would my own, said Ned. You would raise them? After what their fathers have done to your family? Has your Dornish whore of a wife turned you to a Targaryen lickspittle? Robert demanded. There were some grins and laughs from the assembled nobles, notably Tywin Lannister smirked. Sir Arthur Dayne did not look kindly at him for how he addressed his sister, whilst Ned drew ice, and the Kingsguard did not even draw their swords whilst Ned pointed ice furiously at Robert, especially not Sir Arthur, nor Sir Barristan. You will never ever call her that again, Robert. Never. Ned shouted with as a cold and frightening fury. His infuriated shout seemed to shake and silence the throne room and seemed to have even caught Tywin Lannister by surprise as he took a few steps away from Ned, blanching as he did so, as though Ned would explode in a fiery rage. Robert was astonished that Ned would point his sword at him and shout at him so. The entire throne room turned silent at Ned pointing his sword at Robert. At that moment, Jon couldn't decide which was more frightening, Ned armed with ice or the power of Ned's furious voice as he murderously glared at Robert, Cersei and Tywin, as if daring them to continue. They are dragon spawn. They will destroy the realm if they are allowed to live. Robert spat. They are infants, Robert. Daenerys is only a few weeks old. Where is the fucking logic in such murders? Ned spat out as his fingers curled around Ice's pommel as the blade pierced the floor. Every moment that they live, hundreds of thousands of innocents across the realm are at risk from further war and bloodshed. So, what is the lives of 3 children, calmly said Tywin Lannister. Oh, shut up, you Lannister fool. You've no right to talk about innocent lives being lost after how your fucking army sacked this city and raped and murdered defenseless small folk, you fucking coward. Ned shouted as he pointed his finger accusingly at Tywin Lannister. Despite Tywin's fury at Ned for daring to call him a fucking coward and voicing the crimes of his army, others began to voice their opinion. What angered Jon was now there many in the courtroom who voiced their agreement with Tywin Lannister. Stormlanders, Rivermen, Westermen, Valymen, to Jon's disgust, and even Crownlanders and Reachmen. No Northerners, Dornishmen or Rivermen and Crownlander loyalist dared voice approval of such hideous acts. Ned shook his head in disgust as he faced the entire hall and spoke, and with every word, his powerful voice thundered across the throne room, heard by all. This may be because I am a barbaric and savage northerner, but I would never ever harm defenseless and innocent women and children. And yet what do I see right now? Supposedly civilized southerners who look down on northerners as savages with their talk of chivalry, honor and knightly virtues. With that in mind, by what so-called right do any of you have to tell me that the right thing to do is murder them? By that so-called logic, myself and Robert should have been handed to the Mad King to murder to stop this war from starting. Jon grinned whilst many lickspittles who dared to agree with Tywin Lannister looked ashamed at being called out in such a way. Jon caught eyes with his old friend as he looked around the throne room and both nodded at each other. I am with you, my friend. Jon walked towards Ned and faced Robert. Only he joined Ned to support him. You too, Jon. After what the Mad King did your brother, demanded Robert in a disappointed tone. I am a knight, and when I took the knightly vows, I swore that I would defend the innocent. Since when has the murder of children been common practice? And by what right does any so-called knight in this very throne room dare call for the blood of children? Especially children who are too young to even know that they are Targaryens or what crimes their fathers have committed. Gods, whether new or old, would show absolute fury at such terrible and horrific acts of butchery. Jon snapped, refusing to acknowledge his old friend as his king, after this display. Even if it meant saving thousands of lives, you would let them live? Tywin demanded as he turned to Jon. Both Jon and Ned turned angrily to face Tywin Lannister. Why so enraged, Lannister? Are your underclothes still in a twist because I refused to sell my sword to you? Jon asked. A great shout of laughter from the Northerners, the Dornishmen and a few Valymen arose from his question whilst Tywin darkly glared at both he and Ned. They are fucking dragon spawn. They don't deserve to live. It is because of their fucking family that thousands are dead. That my Lyanna is dead. Robert shouted as he stood up and grabbed his hammer. Jon reached for lamentation, whilst Ned raised his hand to hold him back as he stood in front of him. Ned passed him ice. As Jon took hold of the immense greatsword, Ned fearlessly took a few steps forward. Ned, what are you doing? Robert is fucking unpredictable right now. Do it, Robert. But you'll have to kill me first. Do it and become just like the Mad King and murder innocents and your own friends. Come on. Kill me first to get to them and know that she is watching you. Come on, you coward, kill me. Ned shouted as he raised his arms in the air, far away from the handle of ice. Get out of the way, Ned, shouted Robert. No, Ned spat. The entire throne room turned silent at the sound of Ned's thundering voice daring Robert to swing his hammer at Ned. Even Jon was surprised by Ned's show of defiance against the man he once considered a brother in all but blood. But now when he saw Robert, all Jon saw was a man broken in mind by losing Lyanna, the one woman he loved more than any other. Ned's mentioning of Lyanna stayed his hand, and his hammer. Finally, Robert lowered his hammer. Fine. Seeing as Lord Stark sees fit to adopt the children of the family that has murdered his, they are exiled to Winterfell. Elia Martell is exiled to Sunspear. Robert shouted before he sat back down on the Iron Throne. Elia Martell stood her ground and walked towards Ned until she was standing at his side, still holding her infant son Aegon in her arms and with her daughter Rhaenys hanging on to her by the hems of her dress. No. Where my children go, I go, furiously said Elia Martell, though thin and fragile, was not afraid to stand up to him. Fine. Freeze in Winterfell for all I care. Robert bellowed. Ned whispered to Jon as he turned around to Elia, her children and to his own wife, who held Daenerys. Thank you, Jon said Ned as Jon returned ice to him. Good luck, Ned. You'll always have my support, no matter what, Jon whispered back as he clapped his shoulder. Thank you, Lord Royce. And I am truly sorry for your brother, said Elia Martell with a sad and exhausted resemblance of a smile. You are not to blame, Princess. Neither are your children, said Jon before he bowed his head. Ned grabbed Elia by her arm and escorted her back to the Northerners and to Ashura. They all walked towards the doors, whilst the Northerners kept hands on their swords in case of an attack. Before he left, Ned turned around to face Robert. What would Lyanna think of you if she could see you right now? He calmly asked before turning back around to leave with the Northerners. Jon faced Robert as he sat back down on the Iron Throne. He saw how that last question hurt Robert in ways that no sword or arrow could harm him. My love, such talk is treasonous. This cannot be left to go unpunished, said Cersei Lannister. Jon turned to Tywin, whom still glared at him for his taunt. No. Let them freeze in the north, grumbled Robert. Jon glanced at Jon Arryn, whom looked sad at how his wards almost came to blows. Good luck, Lord Arryn. You will need it if you are to be Robert's hand, Jon thought as he returned to his place in the throne room alongside his friends Horton Redfort and Aeon Hunter. Notes. Okay, so Ned and Ashura are going to have a full house in Winterfell, combined with their own children, as well as Theon Greyjoy. And the full list is as follows. Arto Stark. Lyanna Stark. Brandon Stark. Deanna Stark. Ulrich Stark. Serena Stark. Arya Stark. Rickon Stark. Chapter 3, Two Great Warriors. Chapter text. Algadazai. Come on. Strike harder than that, sir. You can do better than that. Algirdas boomed as he swung his sword with one hand and his axe with his other. "I'm going on easy on you, little fawn," said Sir Courtenay. Algirdas laughed loudly before rushing toward Sir Courtenay, not considering how tall and strong he stood with his sword and shield ready to defend each strike. Algirdas thought not of the danger, nor of what blow he may land on him, only of the fight and of victory. He struck hard with his sword at the side of his kite-shaped shield before swinging his axe to the top, dragging it toward him and then striking his sword again at the shield. The blow forced Sir Courtenay to drop his shield and he struck at Algirdas with his sword. Algirdas parried the thrust with his sword and then swung his axe violently across, disarming him of his sword and then jumping up and kicking Sir Courtenay down. Sir Courtenay fell to the ground, coughing as he stood back up, grabbing his sword and shield as he did so. "Gods, Algirdas, you're truly something. Your brothers were either too used to brute force, too calculating or too uninterested when it came to fighting. But you're too fast and too determined," said Sir Courtenay. "Yes, that sounds like me," Algirdas replied with a grin as he wiped the sweat from his brow and handed his practice weapons to a servant. "My lord. Maester Cresson and Lady Caitlin summon you." Algirdas turned around to see Rugger Wensington, steward of Storm's End, standing on the edge of the training yard, taking care to not get his fine brown leather boots in the mud of the training yard. "My thanks, Rugger. I'll be there in a few minutes," said Algirdas before he took a cup of water from a servant and drank quickly. Soon after dressing out of his training leathers, Algirdas ran inside the round tower, and as he walked inside the throne room and saw Maester Cresson, his good sister and his niece talking amongst each other whilst Maester Cresson held a letter in his hand. "You summoned for me?" Algirdas asked. The three turned to face him. Maester Cresson, the only father figure he had ever known after his parents had drowned when he was only a few days old. His good sister Caitlin, married to Stannis after the end of the rebellion which saw the eldest of his brothers crowned king. And his beloved niece Shireen, whom often looked up to Algirdas as a father figure, when her father and other uncles were nearly always in King's Landing. "We did, Algirdas. A raven has come, from King's Landing. It's for you," said Caitlin, extending her hand out and offering the letter. Algirdas reached out and took the letter. "Uncle Algirdas. Can you take me on to the training yard later and fight with me?" Algirdas turned around to see his nephew Fortis running toward him. "Not today, I'm afraid, little stag. Not unless your mother says so." Algirdas wondered whilst ruffling Fortis' hair before turning to face Caitlin. "Fortis, we talked about this. You must attend your lessons with Maester Cresson," said Caitlin. "But lessons are boring, mother. I want to fight with Uncle Algirdas," he complained. "Fortis, you're 9. You need to pay attention in lessons," said Shireen. "At 9. I was already fighting and getting drunk at that age," Algirdas remarked with a grin before turning to Fortis. Caitlin frowned at Algirdas for that comment. "Mother, can I?" Fortis asked excitedly. "No, I promise that you will take further lessons with Sir Courtenay, but only when you pay attention to your lessons with Maester Cresson. Have I made myself clear?" Caitlin demanded. Fortis nodded and said, "I promise, mother." Algirdas winked cheekily at Fortis and patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, Fortis, my boy. One day, you and I will fight together in tourneys and perhaps one day march an army to Highgarden and show those flowery reachmen the fury of House Baratheon." Algirdas said. "Yes, Uncle Algirdas. We'll show the Tyrells up for starving Storm's End." Fortis replied proudly. "Good lad. At least someone here knows who the true enemy of House Baratheon is. It's not the fucking Targaryens, or what's left of them in Essos or in the north. It's the fucking Tyrells, and how that fat cunt Mace Tyrell starved us for a whole fucking year. I swore a long time ago that I would take revenge in the name of House Baratheon for what they did. And by the 7, one day I fucking will." Algirdas turned back to his letter whilst Maester Cresson was walking to his solo with Fortis. "You're spending too much time with him," said Caitlin as she started to leave the throne room. "He's a good lad. He needs to spend time with his family, when his father and other uncles are all in King's Landing," replied Algirdas. "But you're the one who has taught him to hate the Tyrells," said Shireen. "Don't you, Shiri? After what they did to Storm's End and to our house?" Algirdas asked. "Uncle Renly and Uncle Robert don't. And I wasn't there, back then," said Shireen. Well, I was. And they never paid the price nor apologized for what they did. One day, they should do exactly that. And be on the receiving end of the Baratheon fury. Algirdas opened the letter. To Lord Algirdas of House Baratheon. Little brother. It's been too long since we last saw you in the capital. Come to King's Landing. Though Stannis still doesn't want you to bring Cat, Sherry and 40 with you. He wants his children brought up properly before they come to this fucking shit-stinking capital. Gods, just writing that makes me want to cry for how much I miss Storm's End. Send a raven as soon as you are ready to travel and we'll be glad to see you again, little brother. Yours sincerely. Your biggest and best-looking brother. Ah, Robert, you silly whoremonger, Algirdas thought with a grin as he remembered the last time he saw Robert, Stannis and Renly. He had last seen them at a tourney celebrating Shireen's name a day in Storm's End, 4 years ago, when she had turned 10 and when Algirdas was 8 and 10. What makes you laugh, Uncle Algirdas? Asked Shireen. Algirdas turned to her and shrugged. Ah, just stupid talk from your Uncle Robert, little one, he said with a grin. Have you been invited to King's Landing, Uncle? Shireen asked keenly. I have. But I'm sorry to say, Sherry. Your father wants you and your brother properly raised before you set foot in that place, said Algirdas with a sad shrug. But why? I've wanted to go to the capital for years. Shireen exclaimed. I know, Sherry. But, you have to understand, King's Landing isn't a nice place. Everywhere you look, there are ambitious lickspittles and fools pretend to be your friend, only to want to pinch your gold or steal power from another. Even when your father is the master of ships, your uncle is the master of laws, or your other uncle is king, it's no place for a beautiful young lady who doesn't know about the game, said Algirdas. But it's not just about the game there, is it? No. No, it isn't. But, that's what it's like at court. Sure enough, there always be nice parties and feasts to attend and make friends amongst the other beautiful ladies at court and gossip about the handsome young lords and knights coming to the capital for the next tourney. Gods knows there's enough with your Uncle Robert as king. Shireen. It's time for your lessons. Catelyn called, with Septa Mordane standing next to her. Go on. Enjoy your lessons and learn about what ladies do and shouldn't do, Algirdas said with a grin and a japing tone of voice. Shut up, Uncle, replied Shireen with a smirk, at which Algirdas chuckled. Ashura I. After getting up from her empty bed, Ashura walked to Maester Jellimund's solar and, as she had done for the past 3 moons, she asked the same question. Good morning, Maester. Has there been no ravens from Castle Black or from the Wall at all? Not from Lord Stark, my lady. Just from Maester Aemon. He writes that the Night's Watch and the Northern Army march to fight the last of the army of the dead at Skirling Pass. He passed her the letter and she fearfully read the letter. To Lady Ashura of House Stark. My lady, your lord husband leads the Northern Army alongside Lord Commander Mormont towards Skirling Pass to fight the last of the army of the dead. Both are certain that this is the last army they shall face, and that with their defeat and the destruction of the Night King, the world shall at last be safe from the long night. I also write to inform you that your sons, Lords Artos, Ulrich and Brandon, and your daughter, the Lady Deanna, are all safe and in good health. As are your wards, your nephew Jon Snow, Theon Greyjoy, and my great-great-great-nephew Aegon. Yours sincerely, Maester Aemon Targaryen. I must bring this news to Elia, Rhaenys, Daenerys and my children, was the first on Ashura's mind as she thanked Maester Jellimund and walked downstairs to see her childhood friend Elia having breakfast with her daughter Rhaenys, Elia's good sister Daenerys, and Ashura's daughters Lyanna, Serena and Arya, as well as Lyanna's friends Jane Poole and Beth Castle, and Ashura and Ned's youngest son Rickon. Arya was just settling back home, having been a ward of the Mormonts of Bear Island. Standing close by Rhaenys and Daenerys were their sworn swords, Sir Alliser Thorne protecting Daenerys and Sir Jaime Riker protecting Rhaenys. Mother. Serena called cheerfully. Serena. And how are all my dears this morning? Ashura asked before she sat at her place at the high table. Glad to be back home from Bear Island, Mother, replied Arya, whom had been Lord Jorah and Lady Lyness Mormont's ward for 2 years, just as her elder sister Deanna had. Did you not enjoy being at Bear Island? I thought that you always wanted to be a warrior, asked Daenerys. No, I enjoyed it. Though when Daisy, Alysanne, Jarell and Lyra all left to go and fight at the wall and beyond. I was stuck at Bear Island and with Lady Lyness trying to turn me into a fancy lady like all Hightowers. Lyanna Mormont and I had so much fun going for rides around Bear Island and training on our own, Arya answered, whom looked unimpressed when she mentioned Lyness Mormont, but was happy when she mentioned Lyanna Mormont. I'll never understand why she, a Hightower of Old Town, accepted the proposal of a Mormont of Bear Island. Yes, he is a great warrior and knight and proved that so in Robert's Rebellion and the Greyjoy Rebellion, but Bear Island is hardly a place that would impress the Hightowers. It's only with Ned building the Cailin Canal and giving him the position of Admiral of the Western Fleet and that he gets his fair share of dividends from the trade of the Cailin Canal that Bear Island is richer than it used to be. Elia grinned at Arya's choice words about Lyness Mormont but then noticed the letter in Ashura's hands. Ash, what is that? Is there news? She asked. Yes, said Ash before she passed the letter to her best friend. Elia worriedly read it, rightfully fearing for her only children. Mother. Aunt Elia. What is it? Asked Lyanna. In spite of being no actual blood relation to her children, Elia was always referred to as Aunt Elia by Ashura and Ned's children. They march for Skirling Pass, to fight the last of the armies of the undead, replied Elia. Who would have thought that the mad prophecies that Rhaegar became so obsessed with actually had some truth to them? But all that Rhaegar had done to fight them was all for naught. The war beyond the wall had been ongoing for nearly 2 years, when Ned led the armies of the north to Castle Black in response to the oncoming army of 100,000 wildlings approaching the wall, led by the king beyond the wall, Mance Rayder. But all of that changed, when Ned had seen the reason why they were coming to the wall, not to invade and conquer the north, but to be safe from the undead. Ned showed this to Ashura and their family when he had brought 2 whites in cages from Castle Black to Winterfell. Just seeing the whites had given Ashura night terrors for weeks. Arto's eye. Artos rubbed his gloved hands together as he spied the Stark campsite ahead, eager to feast on the prey he had hunted with Brandon, Ulrich, Deanna, Jon, Aegon and Theon in the edge of the forest. He saw Val, Jon's lover, looking at them from near the camp's edge. What have you Southerners brought for dinner? Deer and some hares, Ulrich replied before he drank from wineskin. Got any wine in that, Ulrich? Our wine has fucking gone, she said as Artos walked toward her, holding a deer carcass with both hands. I. Go on, Ulrich replied before throwing it to her. Why, thank you, Lord Ulrich, sir. What would I ever do without your southern kindness, she asked in a high-pitched voice and a hand over her heart which reminded Artos of Lyanna and Serena. Jon shook his head at his woman before walking to her and kissing her. Are you well, Jon? She asked whilst stroking his hard and bearded face. I. The deer and hares didn't bite, he replied before showing her his catches. Artos was glad to feel the warmth of campfires as he walked past Val and Jon and made his way to the tent he shared with Ulrich, Brandon, Aegon, Jon and Theon, but Aegon had gone to spend time on his own, as he often did. Artos threw down his prey at the edge of the tent and wandered inside, snatching a hunting knife from the table. Gods, I'm fucking hungry, Artos muttered as he brought his deer carcass inside and placed it on his table. I'll be glad once this is all over and we can go back home to Winterfell, Brandon said as he lay down on his bedroll. Just one more battle, said Ulrich as he grabbed his shield and spun it around on the frozen ground. Artos pierced the lower body of the deer and began to eviscerate it from the bottom to the top, as he had been shown by Domeric Bolton, heir to the Dread Fort. Are you sure you're not a Bolton as opposed to a Stark? Theon jested as he threw down his 4 hairs. Quite fucking sure. I don't fucking like listening to screams when I'm back home, as opposed to liking the screams of the girls and women you take to bed when they see the size of your cock, Artos replied with a grin before pulling the deer pelt off of it. Brandon and Ulrich began to light a small fire and Theon grabbed a spit whilst Artos chopped the deer into pieces and ripped out the organs before Theon impaled both front legs with the spit and placed it atop the fire. Artos grinned as he sighed whilst sitting down beside the fire alongside his younger brothers and his brother in all but blood. Gods, I love the smell of sizzling meat. Fuck, I can't believe how much I missed home with being north of the wall for so long, said Theon. Which home, Theon? Pike or Winterfell? Brandon wondered. Both, Theon replied. Well, when you do return home to Pike, there'll be no horse for you. Just salt wives for the choosing from the free cities and beyond, Ulrich pointed out. Something to really look forward to. The Summerals especially, said Theon. I'm not surprised about that. I've heard it said that they consider fucking a way of worshipping their gods and that to be a whore is an important profession. Arto's jest at which they laughed. It is an important profession. That's definitely the first place I'll go to when I get home and become captain of my own ship. Spending time in my bed, their gods will look kindly on them for how much worshipping they'll be doing in bed with me, Theon replied. I wouldn't be so sure, lads. Artos turned around to see Egon and Jon enter their tent. Why not? Brandon asked. Heard from some rangers who've just heard the latest rumors from round Westeros. The Summerals have been conquered by some Valyrian warlord from Lies who fancies himself as the next Egon the Conqueror, Egon replied before drinking from his own wineskin. Stupid cunt, better not outlaw all the good traditions and replace them with his own, Theon muttered with annoyance. Arto's ears were pricked when he heard the footsteps of someone running. It was Deanna, who came running to their tent. Come quickly. Thorin Halfhand and Uncle Benjen have just returned from scouting. The undead fuckers are coming. She had said the last part with an eerie and fearful silence. Even after over a year of fighting the armies of the dead, at the Fist of the First Men, Frostfangs, Craster's Keep, Hardham, twice in the Haunted Forest and most recently at Than Valley, Artos was fearful of the undead that had plagued the North for centuries and millennia. Artos stood up and was about to take his prey off of the spit. You Starks. Allow me, said Egon with a sigh and shaking his head before he grabbed the spit with both hands and put it on the table without hurting his hands. Targaryen show off, Theon muttered as he grabbed his favored bow, a dragonbone bow he had bought from a Pentoshi merchant doing business in White Harbor. Both he and Deanna, whom favored the bow, had dragonbone bows, which they took everywhere with them. We'll have to eat them later for supper, Artos with annoyance, as he could hear his stomach growling at the sight and smell of the meat. Artos led his siblings, Theon, Jon and Egon, to Father's tent, where the Lords of the North, Free Folk commanders and officers of the Night's Watch were already gathered. And how many do they number? Asked Father as Artos stood alongside Small Janumber and Harry on Karstark. 20,000, brother. Of that I am certain. And I saw him, said Uncle Benjen. Him. Artos shivered as he remembered seeing the monster which Uncle Benjen spoke of. He had first seen him at the Craster's Keep, where he had raised Craster and his newly born sons and turned them into White Walkers, after Jon and Val had gone there to kill Craster and rescue his daughter wives. He saw him again at Hardham, where they had begun to evacuate less than 10,000 free folk from there before they were attacked by seemingly endless hordes of whites. And it was there where he had first killed a White Walker, by eviscerating it with a great sword of dragon glass. Salvation had come for the realm when during excavations in the first keep of Winterfell, a chamber had been discovered containing ingots of Valyrian steel. A chamber built by Brandon the Builder, whom had been preparing for the day when the undead would rise again to threaten the living. They will be here by sunrise, Lord Stark, said Thorin Halfhand. Father nodded as he sighed and looked down at the map. Then they will come and find us ready for them. And we will fight to the end. Whether we live or die, we fight to protect the world from they whom would end all life across the world, said Father as he looked up to face them all. Night's Watch, Northerners and Free Folk. We've known that this day would come. We've known it for years now. But as long as we hold them back and kill the Night King, then we might be able to save the world. This will not be easy. Though we outnumber them 2-1, we all know full well of what magic the Night King can use, Father continued. Artos nodded, remembering when at Than Valley, the Night King had summoned a blizzard to push them back just as they had gotten so close to him and killed over a dozen of his White Walkers, and Val, Jarell, Domeric, Torren, Theon and Deanna aimed dragonglass arrows at the Night King. Prepare the valley for battle. Sacrifice as many trees as we must for defenses and for fire, said Father. Aye, my lord, said the Lords of the North. Artos remained behind as they all left to carry out their orders. Are you well, Artos? Father asked. I am, Father, Artos replied with a nod. I am going to the Godswood nearby later to pray. Will you come with me? He asked. I will, said Artos. Father hugged Artos and then all of his children before hugging Theon, Jon and Egon. Whatever happens tomorrow, never forget that I love you all. Even if you are not my blood, I have always loved you as my own, said Father with a sad smile. Chapter 4, A Dark Place in My Dreams. Chapter text. Until You Die, Tom Very as Cleesewin in Game of Thrones. Cleesewin, Tom Very. I need to be back home, not here. I miss Mother, Jonelle and even Maester Rodri's dull lessons. I need to be back and go hunting with Father again rather than being here, fighting these fucking monsters. Clee was excited at the thought of fighting this final battle against the last of the army of the dead. And he let his memories of home flood his mind rather than focusing whilst sharpening his dragonglass axe on the grindstone. Any longer, and there'll be nothing left on that axe, he heard behind him. Clee broke away from his thoughts and turned to see Aegon and Artos walking toward him. Clee stood up and grabbed his shield with his left hand and held his battle axe with right hand. You saw wins and your axes, Artos commented as he shook his head with a smirk. Don't your mother's family favor the sword as opposed to all other Dornishmen? Clee asked. Aye, true enough, Artos replied with a nod. Just out of interest, has your lord father let you hold his axe yet? Aegon asked whilst eating a chunk of roasted meat. Ever since Valyrian steel ingots were discovered in the first keep of Winterfell, weapons had been forged for the Northern Lords and even for the free folk leaders whom swore fealty to Lord Stark and for the lands beyond the wall to answer to Winterfell. House Sewin had been awarded a great battle axe which father had named Vorpal. Aye. And I can't fucking wait to one day take it into battle, said Clee eagerly. Come, Clee. We're going for a drink. What could be our last, said Artos. Clee nodded and followed he and Aegon. For a long time when he was a boy, Clee had despised Aegon, his sister and his aunt for being Targaryens. Father had a particular hatred for Aegon's grandfather and his father, for Rickard Stark was his childhood friend when Lord Major Sewin was warded at Winterfell as a boy. But over the years, attending feasts at Winterfell and brawling and fighting in the training yard with Aegon, Clee saw past his Targaryen heritage. All other sons and heirs of Northern Lords had. Especially when Aegon was raised as a Northerner, spoke like one and not like some fancy twat from down south, and he worshipped the old gods, and he often said that he had never set foot in a September. Clee followed them to Artos' tent, where he sat beside Benfred and Brandon Tallheart, and Daisy Mormont passed him a mug of Carhold bronze. Smalljon belched loudly after drinking 2 mugs of Carhold bronze. Our last battle up here, north of the wall. That'd be fucking nice. That the war can end and we all can return home, commented Harry on Karstark. Life will be so fucking strange when we all go back home, Aegon commented before finishing the last of his tankard. Aye, it will be. First thing I do when I get back home, is be drunk for a whole fucking week and wake up with at least 2 whores in my bed. Asher Forrester commented before belching louder than Smalljon. Only 2. I'm surprised, Forrester. I thought from your stories that you'd have a small army of whores fighting over getting into your bed. Jarell commented. No, Jarell. That's me you're getting confused with. Theon boasted. Fuck off, Squid. How about I pull down my breeches and show you who's got the biggest cock north of the wall? Smalljon bellowed. Bold fucking words from a fucking umber, said Rickard Ryswell before he slipped from his stool, spilling half of his tankard over his armor. Come on them, Ryswell. You big stallion. Let's see your horse cock, said Smalljon. I wouldn't be so sure, Smalljon. The Ryswells only get their cocks out for their horses, said Aegon. All right, then Targaryen. Let's see your cock, big dragon boy, and see if it's worth boasting about, said Roose Ryswell. You've upset him, Aegon. The Ryswells don't get their cocks out for their horses. They spread their legs for their horses. Smalljon added. I'd rather see yours, Smalljon, so I can cut it off, said Domeric. Oh, Dom. You're a man after my heart, Lyra commented whilst holding her hand over heart dramatically as though she was a soft, southern lady. Clee was laughing with everyone else at the banter between them before a loud war horn could be heard. Night's Watch, said Roderick Forrester, instantly recognizing the sound. Each man and woman in the tent reached for their sheathed weapon. A second could be heard. Clee took a deep breath as he tightened the grip on his axe. And then he heard the third. Old gods, watch over us today as we fight to save the world from the monsters that would destroy it. Clee finished his drink and ran out of the tent and looked around for the household men of House Sewin. He saw father climbing onto his horse before being handed Vorpal by his squire. Clee. Father bellowed. Klee ran to father's side, gripping his hand as he got to him. Are you ready? Aye, father. I'm ready. To show these undead fuckers that they should have stayed dead, Klee replied fervently. Father patted him proudly on the shoulder. Good lad. Honed and ready, he said as held Vorpal up high. Honed and ready, Klee repeated as he held up his own axe. Klee led half of the footmen of House Sowin to the front line, in the pass between the two high mountains, where the undead would be forced to fight them on. Klee looked up at the mountains, where at different levels, there were dozens of groups of archers from houses Bolton, Tallheart, Stark, Glenmore, Forrester and Carstark, all commanded by Deanna, Theon, Bran Tallheart and Ethan Forrester. As Klee ran to the front line, where in front were lines of sharpened stakes and trenches dug in front of the stakes. Klee took a deep breath as he looked at the horizon and saw an enormous horde of undead, all spread out, with absolutely no organization at all. All were sprinting towards them and with undead mammoths and giants behind them. Klee looked at his axe of dragon glass and kissed the blade. Cut down as many of those bony fuckers as we come across. I want to go back home, hug mother and Jonelle and one day wed a pretty girl and have children. I thought life a joke because I am heir to House Sowin before marching north. Never again. Steady, lads, Klee said to his men at either side of him, whom showed their fear as they could all hear the fearsome screeches of the charging undead. Hold your ground, men and women of the north. We stand here at the edge of the world to save all whom live from the walking dead. So long as you stand your ground, they will not win. If I am to die here, I will die fighting. What of you? Will you run? Will you flee back to your kin? The kin who will become like them because you didn't fight, shouted Lord Stark. No. Klee proudly shouted as he took deep breaths. Stand your ground then. And when night falls, I swear to you all, they will all be naught but fucking piles of bones and ice. Fight with me, sons and daughters of the North, and let's end this war with a northern victory. Lord Stark boomed as he rode before them on horseback. Klee roared and cheered as he lifted his axe up. Now, my lord. Theon called from the mountain. Open fire. Lord Stark ordered. The archers fired numerous volleys on the charging army of the dead. Klee nodded with a grin as he saw dozens of undead soldiers, giants and mammoths collapse from the arrows. Again. Light the scum up. Lord Stark commanded. And in reply, the archers fired with flaming arrows, and Klee's grin widened into a large smile when he saw what looked like hundreds of undead falling to flaming arrows. And that's just the warm-up, you fucking undead. As wights ran past or ran over burning weights, they too caught fire and were falling dead also. But as they burned, the giant wights and mammoth wights charged past. Klee turned to see father ride alongside Lord Stark to join the cavalry. Good luck, father. Klee turned his head back to the battle when he heard the roaring screech of giants and mammoths. Klee took 2 spears, with dragonglass spearheads, and he threw one at an oncoming mammoth. The spear was lodged into its enormous skull. He threw his second at a giant at its side. The spear hit it in its chest. The giant fell to its knees whilst the mammoth exploded into pieces. The giant also exploded whilst more charged toward them. Klee roared and was the first to break rank. He sliced his axe across at a giant armed with a massive club. The giant hadn't seen Klee until it was too late. His axe had sliced into its hip and then he slammed the head into its groin. The giant screeched loudly and horribly before it exploded. Klee was glad when he saw Artos, Smalljan, Ulrich, Brandon, Harion, Eddard, Torren, Egon, Daisy, Alysanne, Jarell and Lyra joining the fighting, slashing and smashing into wights, giants and mammoths. Klee felt his heart sink to see a giant riding atop a mammoth and smashing its club onto a group of Night's Watch brothers and then onto a group of men of House Hornwood men-at-arms. Klee ran towards this foe, slicing at the mammoth before it could swing its enormous tusks at him. He missed its leg, and the mammoth turned its dark and lifeless eyes to him. Klee dodged back before it could swing its head and impale him with its tusks. Klee threw his shield at it and then roared as he grabbed his axe with both hands and leapt up toward it. The mammoth swung its tusks at his shield, shattering it to pieces. But it didn't move in time to avoid Klee when he buried his axe into its skull, just above its eyes. The mammoth exploded. Klee was pushed back, landing on the ground, us first, reminding him of the blizzard at Thun Valley. Klee groaned as he stood back up. He looked at his arms to see numerous gashes on it. He stood back up to see the giant that had mounted it was just starting to stand up. Klee groaned with pain as he forced himself to stand back up. Fuck, that fucking hurts, he thought as he stared at the giant, who had its back turned to him. Klee ran at it and sliced his axe at its spine 3 times. The giant collapsed onto its knees before Klee finished it off by smashing his axe across into its face. The giant exploded, and as it exploded, Klee saw what looked like dozens of White Walkers approaching them. No. Not fucking them. The Night King must be running out of foot soldiers now. Sigornthon shouted. Back. We have to get back. Now. Artos commanded before he threw a dragonglass spear at a White Walker, impaling it in the stomach. Klee ran back, following Lyra and Ulrich, whom had just smashed 2 whites down with his axe. Klee panted as they retreated further into the valley, just as their archers were unleashing volleys of dragonglass arrows and fire arrows onto them. Klee was glad to see several White Walkers die. He grinned when he heard the familiar war horn of the north ahead of the undead, just behind them. The White Walkers turned behind in confusion. Not quite what you expected, is it? Dormont Giantsbane asked with a laugh. The White Walkers turned back to face them. Lord Stark's plan will destroy them here. It must. This is not the fucking end of us, nor is it the end of the world. Egon I. A second White Walker charged at Egon with a spear. Egon blocked his thrust with Black Fear once and then twice before drawing a dragonglass dagger from his belt. It sliced at the dagger to disarm him, but as it disarmed him, Egon chopped Black Fear onto it, eviscerating it. The White Walker exploded before Egon picked up his dragonglass dagger and threw it at the spine of one running up the mountain towards their archers. It exploded just as Theon was aiming an arrow at it. Thanks Egon. Saved me an arrow. Just keep shooting at these fucking monsters, Theon. And you won't hear no complaints from me. Egon yelled back before another White Walker charged at him with a battle axe, one as big as Klee's. Egon dodged its first swipe at him and then Egon struck Black Fear onto it. It blocked Black Fear, but Egon grinned when he saw the fear in its cruel and dead icy blue eyes. That's right, you icy fucker. This is Valyrian steel. One of the few things in the world that can destroy you cunts. They clanged their weapons together, both were pushing their weapons toward the other. The White Walker's brows twisted in fury as it pushed its axe toward Egon, turning his grin into a fearful grimace. Egon tried to push the axe to the side. The White Walker responded by punching him hard in the chest. Egon collapsed to the ground. Egon couldn't feel Black Fear in his hands. He looked to his side, but then he looked up. The White Walker stood above him, its axe raised in the air. Suddenly, it exploded. Egon panted as he spotted an arrow of dragonglass amongst its icy shards. Just looking out for you, winged lizard, he heard from the hills. Glad to have you watching out for me, squid. Egon shouted before grabbing Black Fear and standing back up, glad to rejoin the battle. Egon sliced Black Fear onto a White Walker armed with a great sword. It blocked the blow, but had the familiar fearful glare in its eyes when they fell onto the Valyrian steel sword of both House Targaryen and then the rebellious House Black Fear. It swung its own sword at Egon, which he narrowly dodged. The second blow it swung at him, Egon shivered when he felt the sharp touch of ice on his arm. He looked down and saw that it had cut him from his elbow to his wrist. It sliced down onto Egon, which he blocked and then forced the sword to the side. As the White Walker tried to regain its balance, Egon sliced across its belly. The White Walker exploded as Egon panted through his teeth as he felt the pain in his arm. Another crossed paths with him and tried to impale him with a spear. Egon grabbed the spear with one hand as it narrowly avoided his rib cage. And with his other hand, he eviscerated it from its groin to its neck with Black Fear. The White Walker exploded, and as it exploded, Egon could feel the icy touch of its spear disappear from his other hand. 2 more came at him, one with an axe and the other with a hammer. The one with an axe chopped across with its axe and Egon blocked it with Black Fear, making sure that its axe hooked onto the blade, giving Egon the chance he realized that needed. He stabbed it with the blade as he pushed it toward the White Walker. He pulled it out before it exploded before facing the one with the hammer. You favor the hammer, like the man whom killed my cunt of a father, he thought with a skull. It swung at him once, he dodged the blow by jumping back. The next blow, it smashed down onto him. Egon blocked the blow and then sidestepped, nearly slicing onto its leg as he did so. The White Walker turned to him and smashed its hammer across at him. He blocked the blow and then swung Black Fear across, slicing its throat. The White Walker exploded. As it exploded, Egon looked around at the many White Walkers they still had to fight. How many more of these icy fuckers are there? Where the fuck is the fucking Night King? As if to answer his inner question, he heard a frightened voice behind him. Fucking hells. It's him. The fucking Night King, screamed Brandon Dustin after he cleaved a White Walker with his axe. Egon turned around to see what looked like 30 more White Walkers joining the fray, and behind them, standing 2 feet taller than each of them, was the Lord of the Undead. Egon took a deep breath before he charged towards the first of the oncoming White Walkers. Taste my fire and blood, fucking monsters. Egon shouted before slicing Black Fear across at one armed with a sword. It easily blocked his blow, and tried to slice its own blow at Egon's neck. Egon somersaulted backwards, missing his neck, but cutting his forehead. Fucking cunt. Egon's anger forced him to stand back up and hold Black Fear with both hands as it charged at him. He blocked its first thrust and then at its second, it tried to slice down at him with an overhead blow. Egon dodged the blow and swung Black Fear across, slicing at its belly. Just as he caught his breath, it exploded. As he held Black Fear up, ready to fight the next, he looked at how all of the White Walkers stared at him. Including the Night King. Come on. Which of you is the next to die forever? Come and fucking die. Or do you fucking fear me? As if to answer his question, another came charging at him with a large axe. And as it charged toward him, the others came charging, just as Egon's friends, Artos, Ulrich, Bran, Deanna, John, Theon, Smalljan, Harion, Torren, Eddard, Daisy, Alyssane, Jarell, Lyra, Brandon Dustin, Owen, Robin, Donal, Sigorn, Dormund, Torek, Val, Brandon Tallheart, Benfred, Clee, Domeric, Roos, Ricard and Roger came charging down, screaming their battle cries and shouting the words of their respective houses. Egon blocked a blow from this White Walker and it swung at him again, before revealing a dagger at its side. Egon rained Black Fear down onto it. It fearfully blocked Black Fear with its axe, but then Egon turned his eyes to its dagger. It thrusted towards Egon's chest. Egon yelled as he moved his chest out of the way, only for the dagger to cut at his upper body, cutting just above his abdominal muscles. Egon grunted furiously as he swung Black Fear across, slicing at the White Walker's hand. His blow had cut off its hand. The White Walker stared at its stump in shock before Egon ferociously yelled as he eviscerated it. As he panted, he pierced Black Fear into the frozen ground. He leant on it, taking deep breaths as he looked at the numerous places he had been wounded since the battle began. How much fucking longer will this take? But suddenly, he felt a bone-chilling presence standing in front of him. He looked up in shock to see the Night King standing in front of him, holding up its great falx. It's all fucking over, you fucking cunt. You've fucking lost. Egon spat as he tasted blood pouring down his lips and nose. It pointed its falx at him and gestured at the ground between them. Egon pulled Black Fear out of the ground and pointed it at him. Egon sliced across at it, but it easily blocked the blow and swung Black Fear across, taking Egon with it. Egon stood back up as he pulled Black Fear out of the ground, and as he did so, he saw the Night King take up a spear from one of his dead foot soldiers. He turned to him, glaring at him with his fearful icy eyes. He gripped the spear and threw it at Egon. Egon jumped aside the moment he saw him lift the spear to throw it, somersaulting across in the snowy rocks. He looked up to see the spear pierce into a large rock and the rock cracked and fell to pieces. Egon looked up and stood back up, leaning on Black Fear as he did so. He swung it across at the Night King, whom quickly and easily blocked each blow with skill and speed like none Egon had ever seen. Egon sliced down, and he blocked it, with Black Fear clanging onto the center of his icy falx. The Night King bounced it off of his falx and with the back of his falx, hit it onto Egon's wounded side before slicing him from his left shoulder to the middle of his abdominal muscles. Egon fell to the ground, groaning as he did so. The Night King pressed the blade of his falx against his blooded face. No. No. Not like this. Egon reached up and grabbed the falx with one hand, forcing it aside. He grabbed Black Fira with his other hand and stood back up, yelling as he swung it down onto the Night King. The Night King blocked his blows, and as Egon swung to his side, the Night King blocked with the back of his falx and then sliced the blade across Egon's shoulder. Egon gritted his teeth, determined to not scream, show pain or fear as he sliced again at the Night King. He swung Black Fira at him again, and as they pressed their weapons against each other, Egon dodged his fist when he saw him try to punch his wounded chest. Egon used this as a chance and sliced Black Fira onto his shoulder. The Night King stared in shock that his weapon harmed him. "Do you feel it, monster?" "The pain?" Egon asked, grinning before he spat blood pouring out of his mouth. The Night King stood upright and readied his falx to chop down onto Egon. "I'll take that as an eye, fuckface," Egon said with a chuckle. The Night King smashed his falx down onto Egon. He only managed to block the blade, but as he did so, he punched him in the side. And as he lowered his guard, the Night King sliced him from his shoulder to his sternum. Egon groaned as he fell to his knees. Gods, that punch felt like a fucking battering ram. He looked at his wounds, and felt that the next was going to be his last. "No. I'm not fucking dying like this." Egon looked up at the Night King as he swung his falx to his shoulder, as if readying himself to chop his head off. "Oh, no you don't." As if to tell him the opposite, the Night King swung his falx across. Egon blocked the swing with Black Fira and then grabbed the falx with his left hand. He then released his grip on Black Fira with his right hand and grabbed the falx with his right hand also. With his last remaining strength, he shoved the blade of the falx onto the ground and then reached for Black Fira. He sliced Black Fira down onto the Night King. He panted as he realized that he hadn't blocked nor dodged the blow. He had eviscerated him. "This is for Uncle Brynden," Egon thought as he thrusted Black Fira into his heart. "I told you it's fucking over, didn't I?" Egon snapped as he stared at his icy eyes. The Night King stared him hard in his eyes. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, you icy fucker." Finally, the Night King exploded. The force of the explosion pushed Egon back, with Black Fira in his hands as he landed on his back. Everywhere around him, Egon could hear familiar explosions. Is it done? Is it truly over? Have we won? Egon. Egon. Egon smiled when he heard the familiar sound of Ulric's voice. Ulric came running over with Artos, Harion, Smalljan, Theon, Daisy, Roderick and Domeric. "You did it. You did it, you fucking mad dragon," Harion commented. Egon muttered before coughing blood and struggling to keep his eyes open. "No, I'm not dying like this. Pick him up. Come on," Ulric shouted. Ulric picked him up by his left arm, whilst his right arm was picked up by Smalljan and his legs were picked up by Daisy and Harion. "Come on. Just breathe, Egon. You can do this. We're going to get you back to Castle Black and to your old and ancient uncle," Egon heard Roderick say before he finally closed his eyes. Chapter 5, A Painful Return. Chapter text. Eliana Sister. They are coming back. Eliana heard outside her chamber. She turned around to see Arya rushing around with excitement. "Thank the gods they return. It's been over a year since I last saw Father, Artos, Brandon, Ulric, Deanna, John, Theon, and Egon." She stood from her chair and followed Arya to the feasting hall and then onto the courtyard. Eliana was elated to see Father ride through the gates of the great keep of Winterfell. Followed closely behind by her brothers, her cousin, her sister and Father's wards, Theon and Egon. But when she saw Egon, she felt her heart sink to see him covered with bandages over his face. Mother greeted Father as he climbed down from his horse. "Ned," she said, running to him and hugging him. "Ash," he replied, holding her fiercely before running his hands through her hair and kissing her. Eliana ran up to Artos and then to her twin, Brandon, and Ulric, whilst Deanna was being hugged by their youngest sister, Arya, whom had long looked up to Deanna. "Thank the gods you are all back home," Eliana said when she hugged Brandon. "Not the gods you should be thanking, sister. It's Egon," he replied gruffly. "Did he?" "He did. But the monster wounded him many times," said Ulric. Come now, Rhaenys, don't swarm your brother. Let him breathe, said father when he noticed Rhaenys hugging her brother hard. Whilst Rhaenys did just that, nothing stopped Aunt Elia from crying as she held and hugged Aegon. Mother, I'm all right, Aegon tried to assure her, whilst blushing as though he was embarrassed. Ulrich. Bran. Help Aegon to Maester Jellimund, father ordered. Both her brothers walked to Aegon. I'm fine, I can walk there myself, Aegon told them. Not with those wounds all over you, fool. You heard Father, Bran snapped before both he and Ulrich dragged Aegon to Maester Jellimund. What happened to him? Rhaenys asked Artos. Elayna, Aunt Elia and Daenerys turned to Artos as he looked at Aegon walking inside. He fought several White Walkers before he came to face the Night King. We were all fighting White Walkers to be able to help. But even then, he managed to kill him. But those monsters cut him on his face, chest, shoulder and arm at least 5 times. Maester Aemon has skill like no other Maester and saved him. He says that he'll be fine once he has plenty of rest, said Artos. Aunt Elia and Rhaenys ran after Aegon as Ulrich and Brandon were taking him to Maester Jellimund. Elayna and Daenerys ran after them. When they reached Maester Jellimund's solar, she saw Aegon shirtless and sitting on Maester Jellimund's table, with numerous wounds across his body. Elayna saw wounds on both arms, his abdominal muscles, his upper body, his shoulders and a couple on his face. There were a few gashes and numerous bruises on his legs and arms, but nothing that compared to the 2 large wounds that were carved from his upper body to his sternum. How did you survive such wounds? Elayna felt tears in her eyes when she saw the wounds. Aegon's hard gaze, which was hardened around her brothers, softened when he saw Elayna. He shyly turned away from her. Come on. You're not helping by standing there, said Bran before he and Ulrich started to push everyone out of the solar until Maester Jellimund was alone with Aegon. Elayna sat outside of Maester Jellimund's chambers alongside Rhaenys and Aunt Elia. Until mother and father joined them. Has Maester Jellimund said anything? Father asked. Elayna looked up when she heard 2 pairs' footsteps approach the door. She stood up as the door opened. My lord. My lady, said Maester Jellimund. How do they look? Father asked. Well, Maester Aemon is incredibly skilled for an old and blind man. He will live. I've given him some concoctions to prevent any infection and some mead to dull the pain. As long as he avoids the training yard for the next few weeks, he will heal, he assured them. Thank the gods. Alga does too. Gods, how do my brothers put up with this disgusting place? I honestly found Lord Sport more pleasant smelling than this fucking city during the Greyjoy Rebellion, Algirdas thought as he remembered the days when he was Stannis' squire during the days of the Greyjoy Rebellion, his first war. Algirdas often prayed that it wouldn't be his last war. At the Red Keep, he was escorted inside by Sir Oswyl went to Robert's Solar. And where are my brothers Stannis and Renly, Sir Oswyl, he asked his escort. They are attending a session of the Small Council, my lord, replied Sir Oswyl. And if they are at the Small Council, why is Robert not there? Gods, I love my brothers, but Robert was never born nor raised to be a king. Looking around, Algirdas spied the numerous Lannister banners that hung alongside the banners of House Baratheon. Cersei, the spiteful bitch as always, still thinking that the Lannisters are better than everyone else. If that's the case, how come the Lannisters were crushed by the Targaryens at the Field of Fire and subjugated in the first place, unlike the Martells of Sunspear and Dorne as a whole? He also saw a couple of banners which were decorated with the Lannister lion one side and the Baratheon stag on the other. Joffrey's personal banner, Algirdas thought as he remembered the true reason why Stannis didn't want to bring his children to the capital. If that little cunt could skin and harm kittens for pleasure and beats his own brother and sister, what would he do to my beloved niece and nephew if they were here? And what would Cersei do? Not a single thing if it meant 2 less claimants to the Iron Throne in the way of her perfect Joffrey. They arrived at Robert's Solar and Sir Oswyl knocked on the door. Your Grace, Lord Algirdas is here, said Sir Oswyl. Bring him in already, Oswyl. The little stag. Robert boomed whilst slurping. Are you drunk already, brother? It's not even dinner time yet. Sir Oswyl opened the door and Algirdas saw his older brother sat behind his desk and putting a bottle of Arbor Gold aside. Arbor Gold. The wine of House Red Wine. The same house which blockaded Storm's End whilst you were fighting and taking glory at Summerhall, Stony September and the Trident. Brother. And look at you. As handsome as Renly, and you look like a warrior as I did when I was your age. Robert bellowed before standing up. As he did so, he reached out with his large arm and grabbed Algada's arm and gripped it. And almost as muscular as I was when I was 6 and 10. Won't be long before you're fighting in tourneys, he said before patting him on the shoulder. Oh, I don't think so, brother. Tourneys are dull and boring. I'd much rather make my name as a sellsword and fight all around the world, Algada's replied. There are times when I would have wanted the same rather than being king. But, let's not talk about that. What shall we talk about then? Where you got the wine? Oh, Abergold. Some fine wine that is. Drink. No, thanks, brother. I prefer some Dornish red, Fairmarket Burgundy, or even something from home in the Stormlands such as Mistwood Grey, replied Algada's. Robert shook his head with annoyance. I see that you still hate all things Tyrell and of the Reach, Robert commented. Don't you? After everything they did to Storm's End and to our family. They were commanded to do so by the Targaryen cunts, replied Robert with a dismissive hand gesture. They were commanded to capture Storm's End. But Mace Tyrell, the fucking slothful coward that he is, decided to starve it into submission rather than capture it as a true warrior should, Algada snapped. I was only 4, Robert, when it began, and I was 5 when it ended. Stannis went out of his way to feed Renly and I what little things he could. He fed us before he fed himself. All whilst you were more interested in fighting to free your lady love from her Targaryen captors. What is that wine anyways? A bribe from Mace Tyrell to wed Joffrey to the Rose of Highgarden. Algada scoffed. Wouldn't surprise me. But the next time he comes around to ask for it, I'll tell him to piss off. I'm saving that offer for the Starks, he replied. For Ned Stark's eldest girl. You haven't seen the man since the Greyjoy Rebellion, and even then, he refused to even speak to you. He only spoke to you through Jon Arryn to take on Theon Greyjoy as his ward, said Algada's. I thought that he would get rid of Aerys and Rhaegar's dragon spawn by then, but he still has not to this day, Robert replied, whose face was turning red, as though he couldn't wait to kill them. Now, tell me. How are they? Algada's didn't need to ask for clarification as to whom he was speaking of as he calmed down from mention of the Targaryens. They are well. I found them all and brought them to Storm's End. 6 of them are strong lads and I'm training them to be knights, and a 7th wants to be a blacksmith, and another 3 are studying before going on to train at the Citadel. 2 of the girls are becoming septars, and the rest of the girls are learning to be handmaidens or healers, Algada's replied. And the rest? Robert asked with a nod. Still babes at the breast or are little children. I've done what I can for them, in spite of Catelyn's distaste for having bastards in her home, Algada's replied. There was a knock on the door. The hand of the king, the master of ships and the master of laws are here, your grace, said Sir Oswyl. Bring them in, Oswyl. Robert called. The door opened as Algada's turned around to see Robert's foster father, and Algada's 2 brothers, Stannis and Renly. Algada's stood up as Robert said, and look who decided to join us here. Brother, Renly said softly before Algada's hugged him. Puny as always, Renly. Why is that? Algada's wondered with a chuckle before turning to Stannis. Brother. Your children miss you back home in Storm's End, as does your lady wife and dear old Maester Cresson, Algada's commented. I told Catelyn that I will visit home when I am next able to, Stannis commented before shaking hands with Algada's. How are Fortis and Shireen? Why did you not bring them with you? Robert asked. Algada's and Stannis shared a brief glance before the 4 men sat down opposite Robert. Fortis is eager to train to be a knight one day, and Shireen is attentively learning in her lessons. She'll make a brilliant lady one day, Algada's replied. Good, but why didn't you bring them with you? Too many fucking Lannisters here. You should bring some more Baratheons here. Whose fault is that, brother? You're the one who shares a bed with a Lannister, Renly commented. As well as one with many other women. Not that I'm complaining, I love my Baratheon bastard nephews and nieces dearly. They still have a lot to learn about their futures, Robert. I would have my son and my daughter come to the capital when they are a man and a woman respectively, said Stannis. Bah, fine. Now, what was going on in the small council? Has there been news of Viserys Targaryen? Asked Robert. Just that he has taken up residence in Pentos with some wealthy cheesemonger, brother. That and that he has been given a name by those he meets. Viserys the Beggar King, replied Renly. Fitting. Algerdus chuckled whilst Robert grumbled. Ned sent a raven to the small council. Robert. After fighting a war against wildlings in the north, he has now managed to conquer the lands beyond the wall and subjugated the wildlings. He merely asks for formal permission to annex beyond the wall and to build castles, towns and ports across it, said Jon Arryn. Robert grumbled once more. First he takes on the dragon spawn as wards, next he builds the Cailin Canal, then he builds a fleet for the north, builds one for his Dornish friends, builds and restores castles, towns and ports across the north, builds Valyrian roads across the north, now he wants to annex the lands north of the wall. Does his fucking ambition know no end? I hardly see why the Cailin Canal is something to complain about, other than the toll merchants have to pay. Are all of those bad things? Renly asked. They are when he sends ravens to the small council and not to me personally. We haven't spoken since the end of the rebellion when he chose the fucking dragon spawn over doing the right thing. And I haven't seen him since the taking of Pike. There was something else, Robert. We received a raven from the Night's Watch. Lord Commander Mormont writes that with the wildling threat largely ended and no clear threats from beyond the wall, the Night's Watch have a lack of an enemy to fight. Ned Stark recommended that their new purpose could be to have a base in each kingdom to deal with threats such as banditry and broken men, said Stannis. Fine. Implement it. Give them a ruined castle in each kingdom, except for the north. They can keep the wall as their base in the north, said Robert before he turned his head back to Algerdus. Now, I sent for you, brother, because I think that you deserve to be a lord with your own holding. Lord of a holding. Me. Algerdus Baratheon, I would name you Lord of Summerhall. Lord of Summerhall. Yes, that sounds good. However, brother, Summerhall is magnificent. But isn't the place still in ruins, still from when it was set ablaze nearly 40 years ago? Don't be so fucking ungrateful, brother, snapped Robert. He speaks true, though, brother. The castle is in ruins, and even when the Mad King was in power, he couldn't be bothered with restoring it, Renly pointed out. Fine. Tell Littlefinger to send some loans, said Robert with a wave of his hand. No. If I am to be its lord, I'll provide for my home and my people in my own way, not through whoremongering milksops such as Littlefinger, said Algerdus. And I'll bring all of Robert's bastards with me to Summerhall. Yes, I'm sure Catelyn will be glad to see the last of them. Chapter 6, An Unwelcome Proposal. Chapter Text. Ashura 2. Ashura sat with Ned at breakfast, and as they ate, she saw Aegon sit down and join them. Aegon, what did Maester Jellimond say? Asked Elia. That all is well and that I can go back to the training yard, Aegon replied before drinking from a tankard of Barrowton beer. Ulrich and Brandon both cheered whilst Theon patted him on the back. Good, we've been missing you on the yard, Aegon. Shall we go for a ride in the Wolf's Wood afterward to celebrate? Artos asked. I need to breathe the fresh air of the Wolf's Wood again. It always just feels so freeing, Aegon replied with a relieved smile. Can I join you on the training yard? Arya asked keenly. Arya, do you remember what I told you? Ashura asked. But, mother. The lessons are dull. Arya complained. Tell you what, Arya. Attend your lessons this morning and then you can join us when we come back from our Wolf's Wood ride, suggested Ulrich whilst glancing at Ashura. Ashura nodded at this compromise. But, Arya, if you do not attend, I shall know about it, Ashura warned. I will attend my lessons, mother. I promise, said Arya with a nod. Good, Ashura thought before Maester Jellimond joined them with 2 letters in his hand. My lord, my lady. 2 ravens, one from Castle Black and the other from King's Landing, he said. Elia shivered when King's Landing was mentioned. Ever since she, Aegon, Rhaenys and Daenerys had come north, at the mere mention of what was once the home of House Targaryen, Elia feared that the unpredictable Robert Baratheon would demand their heads. Ned promised them from the moment they left King's Landing all those years ago that he would always protect them and never ever let them come to any harm. The same could not be said of the nobility of the north, some of whom lost friends and kin to the Targaryens. But growing up in the north, Rhaenys and Aegon had earned their respect, especially after Aegon's killing of the Night King. Ned opened the letter from Castle Black. He smiled when he finished reading it. "Good news, my love?" Ashera asked. "Aye, Ash. Mance Rayder says that all is well and that they have chosen 12 suitable places across the lands beyond the wall to build settlements, most of them at the coast," Ned explained. 12 doesn't seem enough for less than 80,000 free folk, Father said Deanna. "No, it isn't enough, but you have to bear in mind, Deanna, that many free folk are settling in the lands just south of the wall. And in the Gift. Which reminds me," Jon said Ned before sitting up to face Jon, the only known son of Ned's brother Brandon. Ned had entrusted the name of his mother only to Jon and to Ashera, Barbary Ryswell, husband of Willam Dustin, Lord of Barrowton, whom was Brandon's last conquest before he had first left for Riverrun to wed Catelyn Tully. "Jon Arryn has accepted my request for you to be named a lord. Before the war began, I had ordered for a castle to be built in the Gift, called Snowhelm. And the works are complete. You are to be its lord and head of House Rostock," Ned said before passing him a document of lordship and another of legitimization. Jon, seated where he was, stared at both documents with heavy breathing. "Uncle, Jon could barely say. "Breathe, Jon, breathe," said Ashera with a smile. Jon reread both documents before he stood up and walked to Ned. "Thank you, Uncle." "Thank you," he said tearfully whilst hugging Ned. "It's what you deserve, Jon. Just promise that you'll visit us often," Ned said before patting his shoulder. Their children, Theon, Daenerys, Aegon and Rhaenys all had begun to congratulate Jon whilst Ned nodded to both Ashera and to Elia. Elia often joined them to advise on certain subjects, as she had done when Ned had begun works to build the Cailin Canal, to restore the ruins of Moat Cailin, Wolf's Den and Rider Hall, and to build mines in the hills and mountains around the north. "What is it, my love?" Ashera asked Ned. "The letter from King's Landing. Jon Arryn says that we are permitted to annex the lands beyond the wall, and that the Night's Watch are permitted to do as I had suggested, but he has said that Robert is still upset that I haven't taken the time to try and make peace with him. Robert just proves that he is a lesser man to you for not admitting that he is in the wrong for what he tried to do in the throne room all those years ago." "Is there any mention of my children or Daenerys in the letter?" Elia asked fearfully. "Yes, at first. He mentions that Robert was hoping that sooner or later I would see sense and exile you all from Winterfell and the North," Ned replied whilst shaking his head, spiteful of Robert. "It's easy to forget that not everyone is as wise or as smart as you," Ashera often told herself when confronted with the idiocy of others. "At first. There was more?" Elia asked with worry. Ned took a deep breath before nodding. He writes that he managed to convince Robert that the best way to ensure that neither Daenerys, Rhaenys or Aegon are threats, is for the former two to be wed," Ned grimly replied. Elia took a deep breath as she heard this. "What? Robert wants Daenerys to wed Jon Arryn's son and heir, Harold Arryn. And he wants Rhaenys to wed Artos," Ned replied before passing the letter to Elia. Elia anxiously read the letter and took deep breaths as she read the entire letter, as if checking to ensure that there was no clear threat to her children. "And what of Aegon?" Ashera asked. "He said that Robert wants to see him in person one day soon. But I am going to write that Aegon will not be going to King's Landing in the near fucking future," Ned replied before taking the letter from his former foster father. It never surprised Ashera how far Ned was willing to go just to protect Elia, Aegon, Rhaenys and Daenerys after he slew Tywin Lannister's murdering thugs when they tried to murder Elia, Queen Rhaella and their children. And to think, when I first fell for him at Harrenhal, so many of my friends told me that I could do better than the second son of a Lord Paramount. But Ned is one of the best and most honorable men in the realm, he would never betray me for another woman, nor did he hate that I was not a maiden when we first fucked. And he loves each and every one of our children. He is brave, honorable and more chivalric than most southern knights and would never ever boast of his accomplishments." "This Harold Arryn, what is there to know about him?" Elia asked. "I've heard it said that he is a young, handsome, reckless and brave knight. He is a year younger than Daenerys and is skilled with both a lance and a sword. With Jon Arryn as his father, I am in no doubt that he has been raised to be a good and honorable young man," Ned replied. I promised Rulla that I would care for her only daughter as she lay on her deathbed. I want to meet Harold Arryn before they are to wed, Elia said. Of course, Ned replied with an uneasy smile as he took a piece of parchment and a quill and ink pot. And what of Rhaenys? Ashura asked. Ever since they were old enough to understand, I promised each of our children that I would never force them to wed someone they didn't want to and that they should marry out of love as we had done, Ned said bashfully as he looked at Jon Arryn's letter one last time. Artos is a good and honorable boy. He'll be a good husband to Rhaenys, Elia said with a nod. We should tell them now, Ashura said. Daenerys followed Rhaenys, Lyanna, Serena, Arya, Jane and Beth to the lower balcony overlooking the training yard. She was happy to see her nephew Aegon was recovered from his wounds of fighting the Night King. Aegon, Artos, Ulrich, Brandon, Deanna and Theon all seemed to be glad to be back in Winterfell, but Daenerys could always see that they seemed sad. And no matter how she, Lyanna and Rhaenys tried to get them to open up, they would shake them off. Deanna had explained their aloofness by saying, Dany, the simple fact is that you weren't there, so you wouldn't understand. Daenerys turned to Sir Alisa for an explanation. Why do they seem so reluctant to talk about what it is that troubles them, Sir Alisa? The grizzled knight grimaced and said, Princess, I may not have been at the wall, but I do know from my own experiences of fighting, that what they saw and did, especially with the enemies they fought, that it has hardened them and it haunts their minds and may give them night terrors. They wouldn't know how best to describe what it is they are going through, Princess. And if anyone whom hadn't seen or done the same as they, how could they possibly explain to them what it was that troubled them, when they had a hard time dealing with it? Amongst each other, they seemed happier, which Daenerys was glad to see. Aegon and Artos often duelled together with the same weapons, with great swords. Though Artos was the stronger of the two, Aegon was faster. Theon and Deanna often contested whom was the better archer. Whilst Ulrich and Brandon fought each other to the amusement of the ladies watching. Jon was spending his last time with them training before he was to pack his things for his new home of Snowhilm. Daenerys' thoughts of her nephew were interrupted when she heard her foster mother speak. Dany. Artos. Come. Daenerys stood up and looked at Aunt Ashura, whom was the most beautiful woman Daenerys had ever met. Even after giving birth to 8 beautiful children, Ashura Dayne had lost none of her legendary beauty. It made Daenerys happy at seeing her and Uncle Eddard so happy and so in love with each other, making Daenerys hope that she might have the same thing when she would one day marry. Daenerys left her friends and walked with Rhaenys, her niece, in spite of Rhaenys being 3 years older than she. Artos put his great sword aside and Jon stepped up to spar with Aegon. Come on, Jon. Show him the might of the Rystocks. Ulrich shouted to Jon as Jon took up his bastard sword and shield. Artos joined Rhaenys and Daenerys. When she saw how they lovingly looked at each other, Daenerys lightly shook her head. She, Aegon and Lyanna were the only ones whom knew of Rhaenys and Artos, and they would often meet in secret in certain chambers of the First Keep. They had been doing so ever since Artos had turned 4 and 10, and had grown into a handsome young man whom many young maidens of Winterfell gave misty-eyed looks at, including Jane and Beth on occasion. What could this be about? Rhaenys wondered. Hope it's no marriage offers for me from other houses, said Artos as he crossed his large, muscular and scarred arms. Why, Artos? Do you not want to be married to a beautiful northern lady? Not like Aelys Karstark? One of the Mormont or Marndale sisters? Or even Myra Forrester? Daenerys asked teasingly. Gods, Dany. Myra Forrester has spent too long down south in the Reach. As for Aelys Karstark, she's betrothed to Darin Hornwood. The Marndale girls worship the Seven and are probably all fancy and ladylike. And the Mormont lasses, they love fighting more than they would ever enjoy being Lady of Winterfell, Artos replied. Maybe your parents want you to shave that ugly beard you seem to be growing. Rhaenys suggested as she stroked his hairy stubble. Why his beard? Does it annoy you when you're in bed together? Daenerys asked. Both her niece and her niece's lover turned to Daenerys. A little louder, why not, Aunt Daenerys? Rhaenys whispered. Sorry, Daenerys replied. They joined Artos' parents and Daenerys' good sister in Uncle Eddard's solar. Please, be seated, Uncle Eddard said. Artos, Daenerys and Rhaenys all sat down, facing Uncle Eddard, Aunt Ashura and Elia. Daenerys and Rhaenys. We've received a raven from King's Landing. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but King Robert commands that you both are to marry, said Uncle Eddard sorrowfully. I'm to marry. She saw from the corner of her eye, Arthos was tightening his fists at the news that Rhaenys was to wed another man. Daenerys took a deep breath as she thought of what would await her, with whomever her husband was to be. But there must be a way out of this. I don't want to leave. Winterfell is my home. I am to wed, Uncle Ned. Rhaenys asked worriedly, and Daenerys saw tears forming in her eyes. Rhaenys, you are to wed Arthos, said Uncle Eddard. What? Daenerys looked at the two. Arthos seemed to be on the edge of an incoming fury. And Rhaenys was on the verge of tears. I don't think we have to worry about those two. They've been in love for a long time, said Aunt Ashera with a smile. The whole room turned to Aunt Ashera. Ash, asked Elia. Last week, I was inspecting the first keep and there was a guest's chamber which had both Rhaenys' star-adorning necklace and a scrape from a man's tunic. I didn't see whose it was until I saw Arthos on the training yard that day. Arthos looked down on his feet in embarrassment, his cheeks were both blushing. Whereas Rhaenys reached for his hand and held it. And how long has this gone on, Rhaenys? Elia asked. For 5 years, Mother Rhaenys replied unashamedly. We'll speak with you two later. Now, Dany, said Uncle Eddard. Yes, who am I to wed? You are to wed Sir Harold Arryn, heir to the Eyrie and the Vale. An Arryn. Not just any Arryn, but the heir to the Vale. What is there to know about him? Daenerys nervously asked. We do not know much about him, unfortunately. But, I promise that you will not wed him until we have met the young man in person. I will not let you wed someone who will not treat you as you should be treated, Uncle Eddard said with a warm smile. Chapter 7, Insult to Injury. Chapter Text. Arthos 2. That night, after being told that he and Rhaenys were to wed, Arthos had gone to the heart tree of the godswood and prayed and gave thanks to the old gods for allowing them to marry. He had been in love with Rhaenys since he was 7, and it was only when he had turned 4 and 10 on his name-a-day that she had told him that she felt the same way. He was glad to wed her, because he didn't like how numerous northern lords tried to impress him with their daughters or granddaughters, such as Winifred and Wyla Marndale, Eddara Tallheart, or even Joan Elsa Wynn, whom was 10 years older than he. His parents had even received ravens from numerous southern lords offering a daughter to Arthos, and even the despicable Walder Free of the twins offering this daughter or that daughter for him. But both he and Rhaenys were saddened for Daenerys, whom was to marry a man she didn't know and would have to live in a place that wasn't home. A raven had been sent to the Eyrie, inviting Sir Harold Arryn to Winterfell for Arthos and Rhaenys' wedding, so that they could see for themselves just what sort of man Sir Harold was. I will not marry Daenerys off to a man whom will not treat her well, father had said. At least there is that. Dany deserves better than some arrogant and stupid southern lordling whom thinks because he is a petty knight that he can do whatever he likes. But whilst Sir Harold had accepted the invitation to Winterfell, there were guests whom were coming to the wedding without invitation. When mother and father had brought Arthos, his siblings, Aegon, Rhaenys, Daenerys and Theon to his solar, he read out a reply from Jon Arryn. He says that Sir Harold shall come to the wedding, alongside a select group of his closest friends. But, Jon Arryn also writes that a few representatives from King's Landing are also coming, Lannister representatives and Baratheon representatives, father explained. Fucking southern scum. If they do anything to harm Rhaenys, Daenerys, Aegon or Aunt Elia, then I will chop their fucking heads off and send them back to King's Landing. Why do they come? Aunt Elia asked with worry. They come because Robert wants to find out as much as he can about your children and Daenerys. And possibly as a warning to them, mother suggested. If they try anything, the only parts of them that will return to King's Landing will be their heads, said Ulrich. Even if they are unwelcome, they come by royal command. By all means, do not show them courtesy nor respect, but once they are gifted bread and salt, that means they are our guests and they are under my protection, father sternly reminded Ulrich. Aye, father, said Ulrich. Can't we just tell them to leave when they arrive at the gates? Arya asked. I'm afraid not, Arya. If we do, King's Landing may grow paranoid and make threats towards Winterfell, said father. Fucking southerners. We may not be allowed to kill them, But if they so much as make any threat towards Ra, Egon or Dany, I will fucking batter them bloody. Maybe I'll divert their route home to the Dread Fort and ask Domeric to show them some old-fashioned Bolton hospitality. Yes, that's a good idea. They had been preparing for a whole moon for the wedding, and father, mother, Artos and Rhaenys had been sending ravens to all corners of the north, inviting the bannermen to the wedding, Uncle Arthur, Uncle Aaron, Cousin Edric, Aunt Illyria and Uncle Beric Dondarrion, Cousins Semion and Ela, Prince Oberyn and Elaria Sand and their daughters, Prince Doran and Princess Melorio and their daughter and sons. Even the Free Folk commanders had come for the wedding, due to many of them wanting to see Winterfell for the first time, and some, including Mance Rayder, wanted to see what a southern wedding looks like. Due to Aunt Elia and her children living in Winterfell, the North and Dorne enjoyed a beneficial alliance, in which the North gifted many of its improvements to Dorne, such as the secrets to Valyrian roads, a few Valyrian steel swords, aqueducts, and had even gifted a fleet to Dorne. In exchange, the Dornish sent wines, fruits, olives and spices to the North. 3 days before the wedding, the bannermen of the North and the Free Folk had all come to Winterfell and were staying in the first keep. The first of the bannermen to arrive was in fact Jon, newly married to Val, whom was heavy with child. "Can't wait to see your little rustics running around," Artos told Jon when Val showed them the bump in her belly. But the day before the wedding, as Jon Arryn had said, representatives from King's Landing had come. Artos stood with father, mother, Ulrich and Brandon in the courtyard as they arrived. When they rode into the courtyard, Artos' face twisted in fury when he saw the Manticore banner of House Lorch. They dare to fucking insult Ra, Egon, Dany and Aunt Elia by sending a relation of one of the scum whom tried to murder them. From the Stormlands, Artos saw the banner of a scrolled parchment. House Swigert of Spring Beach. Mother was particularly furious to see the banner of House Lorch entering Winterfell. The nobles dismounted from their horses and walked to father. "My Lord Stark, I am Rhaegar of House Swigert and Lord of Spring Beach," said Lord Swigert, a middle-aged man whom was short and pimply, and Artos was certain that he could smell perfume coming from him. "Are the only women you have in your bed whores? Not fucking surprising, you ugly cunt." "And I am Sir Laurent of House Lorch," said the other. "Ah yes, the cousin of one of the fucking cowards whom tried to murder Ra when she was just a little girl. I'll take special pleasure in doing to you what father did to your cousin." Father merely nodded and turned to a servant standing by the steps to the Great Keep. The servant offered bread and salt, which they accepted with hand gestures. "Now, where is the bride?" Lorch asked creepily. "Take a care not to abuse my hospitality," Sir Father snapped furiously. His glare and him raising his voice at their unwelcome guests unnerved Lorch, whilst Swigert faced father. "My lord, we wish not to insult you or your noble house, nor to abuse your hospitality in your own home. But we have orders from His Grace, the King, and we are to see the Targaryens," said Swigert. Artos clenched his fists and was ready to beat them both bloody if they tried to harm Rhaenys. Lorch noticed and turned to Artos. "Ah, this must be the little wolf marrying the wingless dragon," he commented with an unsettling grin, which reminded Artos of Craster before Jon had sliced his head off. "Little? I'm a head taller than you, fucking pig face. And you're the kin of the pathetic insect that tried to murder little children," Artos snapped. Ulrich and Brandon grinned at Artos' remand whilst Lorch glared angrily at Artos. "Sir Laurent. Come," said Swigert, whom grabbed Lorch by his shoulder before he turned back to father. "Lord Stark, His Grace does command that we see the young Targaryens." "You will see them at the wedding tomorrow, or not at all," father said sternly with crossed arms. Of course, Lord Stark," said Swigert before a servant escorted the two men to their quarters. "We should be fucking putting them in the sewer," said Ulrich. "No, that's cruel, for the sewer rats. The sewer rats feast on our shit every day, but to put those twats in the sewers, that's cruel for the wee rats," said Brandon. Lyanna too. Lyanna had been looking out from Serena's balcony window with Serena, Deanna, Arya, Jane, Beth, Daenerys and Rhaenys at the King's Landing representatives arriving in the courtyard of the Great Keep of Winterfell. "Fucking southern pricks," Deanna commented. "Deanna!" Jane exclaimed. Deanna turned to her with a raised brow. "You've been ogling at the lads on the training yard for 5 years now and you're surprised by the words I use." "I expect that from boys and men, not from ladies," Jane explained. "Expect it from warriors." "Not all boys and men are warriors," just look at Maester Jellimund, Deanna pointed out. Will they try anything? Serena wondered. In Winterfell, where they are anything but welcome. They'd be stupid to try, Lyanna replied. But King Robert might let them get away with it. Or Tywin Lannister? Arya asked. Both of them have no influence in the north. Nor have they ever had any northern friends at all since Robert became king, Lyanna explained. Artos would slaughter Lork, Swigert and their men if they dared try and lift a finger against Ra. Lyanna was certain that whilst they were not welcome, they would not be so stupid as to try and harm any of the Targaryens in a place where they had no friends nor allies. Lyanna left Serena's chambers and walked downstairs and saw Aegon speaking with Aunt Elia. How is he? Knowing that these scum are here and one is kin to one of Tywin Lannister's murderers. For as long as she remembered, Lyanna noticed certain things about Aegon that others hadn't noticed. He would get upset if too many were talking to him at once. He rarely changed his facial expressions, even when he was happy. Though he liked the peace and quiet, the only people he spent any time with were Lyanna's brothers, his sister, his mother, Theon and his closest friends amongst the sons and heirs of the Lords of the North. Will I have to meet them, Mother? Aegon asked. I'm afraid so. But whatever they say to you, don't let it get to you. Fools used to call your father the last dragon. They are wrong, Aegon. You, your sister and your aunt are the last dragons. And nothing will ever take that from you, she said sweetly before hugging him. Aegon, Lyanna noticed, rarely would get close with anyone. Whilst Brandon and Ulrich would often go to brothels whilst being led on by Theon, neither Artos nor Aegon would do so. Artos, because of his love for Rhaenys. And Aegon, because she could see that he just didn't feel comfortable when Theon tried to bring him along. Lyanna heard behind her. Lyanna turned to see Ra standing with Serena, Dany, Jane and Beth whilst Deanna and Arya were apart from them. You said that you were going to help me with my dress. I will. But are you not coming, Deanna? Arya. Are you sure you want my help with making a dress? Or Arya's help, sister? Deanna asked with a smirk as she crossed her arms. Sewing is boring, Arya muttered. Come on, little sister. Let's go and draw some targets for us to shoot at. Maybe some lions, manticores, hounds and stags. Deanna suggested with her arm around Arya's shoulders. Whilst Deanna favored being a warrior and using a bow and a sword and shield, she told mother and father that she was ready to be a lady and wed their heir to a northern house. Arya, on the other hand, had no wish at all to be a lady and wanted to be a warrior. Deanna, in spite of growing up as a lady, was the only one Arya would look up to amongst the family, other than the Mormont sisters. Lyanna, Serena, Jane, Beth, Daenerys and Rhaenys had sewn a black dress decorated with an ice dragon on the front and with grey direwolves at the back. Deanna's only contribution was lending a white spear-tooth lion pelt that she had hunted beyond the wall, which she cut up so that half of it could be worn over the shoulders. At last you and Artos can wed. You two spent so long in the first keep, that I'm surprised no one else had found out before, Dany commented. It's good. I can't wait to bed him as husband and wife, Rhaenys replied with a salacious grin. Don't talk about my brother like that, said Serena. That's not very ladylike, Jane commented. But she's not a lady. She's a Targaryen princess, Lyanna thought. Soon after completing the dress, Lyanna looked around for Aegon to see if he was alright, for Rhaenys and Daenerys both seemed to holding it in well. Knowing Aegon as she did, she knew that she would find him in the training yard, which had seemed to be one of the few things he enjoyed. Another thing about him that she noticed was that he had only a few hobbies that interested him, even repetitive things, but it was those that he enjoyed the most and achieved some sense of comfort out of them. She saw him slicing at 4 practice dummies as though he was fighting 4 men at once. Well. A little dragon, so far away from home. Lyanna looked to see Laurent Lorque sneering as he walked onto the training yard. Aegon turned to him, clutching his practice sword hard as though resisting the temptation to slam it onto his face. What's wrong? No words to say. Has your tongue frozen? He asked with a creepy chuckle. Aegon glared darkly at him with a single raised brow. Did your host tell you of how my cousin nearly killed you and your sister and could have had so much fun with your whore mother after your father had abandoned for Lord Stark's whore sister? Bold words from a man who is about to suffer, Egon snapped. At last he speaks. Thank the gods. Lork said with a cackle. But how can you harm me? Lord Stark has already given me and my men bread and salt. But then again, what do dragons know of hospitality? Didn't Lord Stark tell you of how your grandfather burned Rickard Stark and strangled Brandon Stark? Lord Tywine would shower with me gold if I put an end to you and your family. It would be a mercy for all of Westeros, he said as he walked closer to him. Normally when people walked toward Egon, he would walk away, not wanting to be too close to others he wasn't close to. But Egon stood his ground, holding his practice sword up. And it would be a mercy if I reunited you with your cousin, just how Lord Stark killed him, Egon snapped. Just be on your best behavior, boy. If I was to write to Lord Tywine and the king that you had been a treasonous little boy and threatening to usurp his grace, well, not even Lord Stark would save you. Lork walked up to Egon until he was a handbreadth away from him. You're standing dangerously close to fire, ass-face. Either fuck off, or you'll burn, Egon threatened menacingly as he no longer stood idly, but walked toward Lork, whom begun to back away from him. Egon too. Just as mother said, I am a dragon, I'm no fucking weakling, nor will I back away from fucking cowardly scum like you or your cousin. Egon was ready to slam the blade of his practice sword onto Lorca's ugly head and crack his skull open and piss on his corpse, and his blood and brains poured out of his skull. Until a voice broke the tension between the two. What's going on here? Egon looked up to see one of the few people whom was always kind to him and whom he felt understood him. Why did I threaten him as such? What if she saw and heard all of what I said? Just following his grace's command to ensure that the Targaryens are of no threat to the realm, my Lady Lork replied when he saw Elyanna. Egon hated how he looked at Elyanna and at her dress. Keep looking and I'll carve your fucking eyes out. I think that's enough, don't you, Sir Laurent? Elyanna asked before she gestured to the keep. Of course, my lady. Of course, he said. He leeringly looking at Egon one last time before walking away. When he left, Elyanna turned back to Egon. Are you all right? I'm fine, Egon tried to say in a dismissive way. Egon, I heard what he said. I'll tell my father. Don't, Elyanna. It won't matter if you do. Robert won't give a damn about what he said over the word of one of his fucking lickspittles, Egon replied as he turned back to the practice dummies. Egon. The urgency in her voice had more authority this time. Because of which, Egon turned back around to face her. Don't let them get to you. One of these days, Robert will come to Winterfell and want to see you, Ra and Dany. You cannot let them get to you, she said as she reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. Egon nodded with a slight smile in gratitude. Thank you, he whispered with a short nod. Do you want me to stay or do you want to be alone? Why is it only you whom has noticed that there are always times when I just want to be alone and not talk to anyone? Just leave me be, please, he said. Elyanna smiled sweetly at him before walking back inside the Great Keep. Egon put his practice sword aside and walked out of the Great Keep. I need a drink, Egon thought before he started to walk to the only tavern in the Winter City he went to when he wanted to be alone. Egon looked up at the signpost of the Staggering Stark, which had an image painted on it of a direwolf holding a bottle of wine in its mouth. It was what first drew him to the tavern when he was looking around for a tavern where he might somewhere to be away from the rest of the world. Egon entered the tavern and saw the barkeep, Valfric, passing a mug of beer to an off-duty soldier. Egon sat down at the bar. Ah, Egon. Your usual, he asked with a friendly smile. Thanks, Egon replied before passing 2 silver stags to him. Valfric took the silver and came back with a tankard of Carhold bronze and a platter of grilled chicken breast and roasted lamb. Egon took his platter and tankard to a table in the corner of the tavern. It was the same table he always sat at when he ate and drank there. He saw on his usual chair was a small chunk of bread. He kicked it off of the chair whilst he placed his platter and tankard down. He drank a little before eating the chicken. Whilst eating the chicken, he looked up when the door opened. He saw 2 Southerners dressed in furs and red underclothes. He could tell that they were Southerners from how they hugged their furs and how they talked when they paid for drinks. He looked around the tavern to see if there were any other Southerners. He spotted one sitting at a table at the opposite corner of the tavern. He saw that he was a southerner from just how sun-kissed his skin was. But he wasn't Dornish like Mother, Uncle Oberyn, Uncle Doran or his cousins. However, some of the clothes he wore reminded him of the clothes that Aunt Melorio wore when they had come to Winterfell to see Mother, Rhaenys and Aegon. The lone southerner seated at the table often glanced between the two southerners at the bar and then at Aegon. When he did glance at Aegon, Aegon noticed his red hair and his large and scraggly beard. Don't often come across gingers. Only gingers I've come across are Tormund Giantsbane, Jon's dead love Ygritte and a few other free folk whom are kissed by fire. After finishing his lamb and his drink, Aegon stood up and walked with his platter and his tankard back to Wulfric. Thanks as always, Wulfric said Aegon. My pleasure, lad. You sleep well, lad. Good night. Aye, good night, Aegon replied with a nod before walking to the door. But as he did so, he felt eyes on him. He didn't know if it was either the ginger southerner or the ones at the bar. Gods, I need a fucking piss. Aegon looked around and saw the log piles at the back of the Stumbling Stark, where in the past he would chop up logs to feed the fires in the Stumbling Stark. He walked to the back of the piles and pulled his breeches down. As he began to piss, he could hear footsteps on snow behind him. 2 pairs of them. Did Lork send you cunts to kill me? Aegon continued to piss whilst reaching for a dagger tucked in his jerkin's inside pocket. It was a 6 10th name-a-day gift from Uncle Oberyn and it had a dragon's head pummel. Aegon pulled his breeches back up and tightened them with his belt, but as he tightened the belt, the footsteps behind him came closer. Enjoy your last piss, rasped a southern voice. Enjoy your last drink? Aegon asked before he whipped around and turned to see the 2 southerners from the bar. He grabbed the one closest to him by his shoulder and stabbed him twice in the upper body and then once in his belly. He collapsed to the ground, the dagger in his hand fell from his grasp as he landed on his back. He looked up at the second one, whom took a step back from Aegon. I'll leave and I will forget I ever saw you. Who the fuck sent you 2 headless cocks? Aegon demanded. No one sent us, he said, holding his hands up. Including the hand which was holding a falchion. Then why are you holding a falchion and why was your friend holding on to a dagger, you stupid cunt? Aegon snapped. This time, he held the falchion as he would a sword and took a step toward Aegon. King Robert will cover me with gold when I return with your... His speech was interrupted suddenly when he collapsed to the ground, head first, and with a dagger sticking out of his spine. Aegon looked up to see a middle-aged man walk toward him. When he saw his face clearly in the moonlight, Aegon recognized him as the ginger southerner who looked at him in the Stumbling Stark. Who are you? Aegon asked. The man who saved your life, he replied. I was doing fine without your help. Thanks for saving me, but who are you and why did you kill him? Because you have done no wrong, he said before pulling his dagger out of the corpse of the second assassin. Tell that to Robert Baratheon and to my uncle Viserys, Aegon replied as he stood up to face him. Aegon Targaryen, he said. It wasn't a question, it was confirmation. I. And you are? Aegon asked again. Me. I'm Griff. Griff. So, Griff, what's a southerner dressed like someone who's been in the Free Cities doing here in Winterfell? What makes you say that I am a southerner or that I've been to the Free Cities? The garb you wear looks like the garb I've seen Pentoshi and Lysen merchants wear in the markets here in the Winter City and in White Harbor. My Aunt Melorio often wears it also. And you look and sound like a southerner, Aegon replied. You are a southerner also, said Griff. No. I'm no fucking southerner. Come, let's away. Before they are noticed, he said before grabbing him by his shoulder. He dragged him away from the back of the tavern until they were standing at the Brandon's Spring. Brandon's Spring was a natural spring which was now used as a fountain and it was believed by some to possess healing powers. Aegon took a handful of water from the spring and drank. Whether it heals or not, it does taste good. Both Aegon and Griff cleaned the blood from their daggers and their hands using the water. Thank you, Griff, Aegon said. Glad to help, Aegon, he said with a friendly smile, looking at him whilst sheathing his dagger. So who were those men, he asked. Men of Lore and Lork whom visit for my sister's wedding to Artos Stark, Aegon replied. Wed by Robert Baratheon's command, he asked, with a slight scowl on his face. Though for a long time, those two have been in love, so, if it was to be anyone, I'm glad it was Artos, Egon replied. Egon didn't know why, but he felt as though he could trust Griff. And what brings you here? Are you a sellsword? Not anymore. But you used to be. Egon asked. Yes. After the rebellion, I left Westeros and had gone to Pentos and had served in the Golden Company for 10 years, he explained. What brings you back to Westeros? Egon wondered as the two sat down. I just want to see the old country one last time. I'm not welcome in my old home by old enemies I made. I have no wish to endanger my family if I came back home. So, for now, I'm just traveling to see the parts of Westeros that I never got the chance to see before I left for Essos, he explained. Is this your first time in the north? Asked Egon. It is. Winterfell is warmer than I thought it would be, and more beautiful, he admitted. It's a beautiful place. Couldn't ask for a better place to call home, said Egon. That seemed to take Griff by surprise. Winterfell is home, is it? Where else would home be? King's Landing. Dragonstone. Uncle Ned had more reason than any other to hate my family. But he didn't, he took me in and raised me, my sister and my aunt as his own children. No other family would have done that, especially not Southern families, Egon replied with scorn in his voice directed at the Southerners. Griff nodded in understanding before Egon looked at the great keep in the distance. I should be getting back, said Egon. Thanks again, Griff, said Egon. I'm glad to help, Egon, he said with a friendly smile before offering his hand. Egon shook his hand. Are you staying in Winterfell or are you leaving soon? We'll see. Perhaps you'll see me in the Stumbling Stark, he replied with a smile. Chapter 8, A Wolf and a Dragoness. Chapter text. Interlude 2, Bridgerton star Charithra Chandran condemns unbelievably invalidating treatment of minority actors as box stickers. The Independent. Rhaenys Targaryen, Charithra Chandran. This should be the happiest day of my life, to finally wed Artos. But it just has to be fucking ruined, all because of fucking Robert Baratheon, fucking Tywin Lannister and their fucking lickspittles. And they add insult to injury when they send the cousin of one of the men whom tried to murder mother, Egon, grandmother and me. Though she did not have her father to give her away for her wedding, as the tradition would dictate in northern weddings before the old gods, mother was more than happy to give her away. Sir Jaime vowed that he would be by her side during the procession and the wedding. Ever since the arrival of the King's Landing representatives, both he and Sir Alisa had become extra vigilant of she, mother, Egon and Aunt Daenerys. Rhaenys stood in her chambers and looked at her reflection in the mirror. This is the day I've waited for years. To marry Artos and spend the rest of our lives together, she thought as she looked down at the ring he had given her, a gold and silver ring with a Targaryen dragon of black pearls and a stark direwolf of diamonds encrusted on the top. There was a knock on the door. Princess Rhaenys, your mother wonders if you are ready. Sir Jaime asked. I'm just finished, Sir Jaime, she replied before putting an amethyst hairnet which cousin Arianne had gifted her in advance to wear for the wedding. Rhaenys took a deep breath and walked to the door and opened it. How do I look, Sir Jaime? She asked. He turned to her and beamed with pride as though he was a proud father. You look like a true Targaryen princess. Artos Stark is a truly fortunate young man, he replied. We both are fortunate to have each other. Mother was wrapping a becloak pelt around her shoulders before she turned to see Rhaenys. Oh, gods. By the Mother Rowan, you are truly the most beautiful princess in all of the 7 kingdoms, she said with a beautiful smile. She leant in and kissed Rhaenys gently on her forehead before holding Rhaenys' hand. Come, let's not keep them waiting too long. Together, the three left the Great Keep and walked into the Winterfell Goatwood, where Rhaenys looked on the right side to see Uncle Oberyn, Uncle Doran, Aunt Melorio, Aunt Ellaria and all of their children, her cousins, Aunt Daenerys and Egon. Behind them were various nobles and young nobles of Dorne. And on the right side, were Uncle Eddard, Aunt Ashera, Lyanna, Deanna, Brandon, Serena, Ulrich, Rickon, Arya, Jon and Val. And behind them were all lords and ladies of the north and their families. Also there were the leaders of the free folk, whom had been busy establishing themselves as lords, or magnas as they called themselves, beyond the wall and establishing noble houses and family sigils. but at the back were the King's Landing representatives, Lork and Swigert. When Sir Jeremy laid eyes on them, he reached for his sword and kept his hand on it whilst walking past them and glaring furiously at them. "Sir Jeremy, if it ever comes to violence here, be sure to kill Lork first," Mother whispered. "It would be my pleasure, my princess," he replied. "I would like to see that. And to send his head to Tywin Lannister." Rhaenys beamed when she saw Arthos standing before the heart tree. "Gods, he does look fine. I can't wait to take off my dress and for us to fuck as husband and wife. We are going to spend so much time in bed for the next weeks and moons," she thought whilst licking her lips. Uncle Eddard stood next to Arthos as Rhaenys and Mother walked toward them. "Who comes before the old gods this day?" Uncle Eddard asked. "Rhaenys of the House Targaryen, a woman grown, true-born and noble. She comes to beg the blessings of the old gods." "Who comes to claim her?" asked Mother. As he took a step forward, Arthos replied, "Arthos of the House Stark, heir to Winterfell." "Who gives her?" "Elia of House Martell," her mother said. Mother before stepping back to join Uncle Oberyn and Uncle Doran. "Princess Rhaenys, do you take this man?" asked Uncle Eddard. "I take this man," said Rhaenys with a loving smile as she stepped toward Arthos and held his hands. She felt her heart beat really fast when she saw how he smiled at her. "You may now cloak the bride under your protection," said Uncle Eddard before he stepped back to stand with Ashura. Arthos gently unfastened her Targaryen embroidered cloak whilst Rhaenys bent her head down slightly to make it easier for him. Not realizing that she didn't need to, for he was over a foot taller than she. He placed a bridal white cloak over her head decorated with a three-headed dragon and a direwolf. She stood straight as they held hands again and were about to say the vows. "I am his and he is mine. I am hers and she is mine." Arthos lifted his hands to her face and cupped it before kneeling down to kiss her. "Gods, I love the feel of his lips on my lips," she thought as her tongue fought with his. "I love you, Arthos Stark," she whispered as they broke from the kiss. "And I love you, Rhaenys Targaryen," he whispered back. "No, no, no. I'm Rhaenys Stark now. And I always will be," she replied with a giggly smile as they held hands again and led the procession back inside the great keep whilst all around them cheered and clapped. Inside the feasting hall, Rhaenys and Arthos were sat at the high table whilst family and guests brought their own gifts. Uncle Doran had gifted a priceless book, a copy of the Illuminated Lives of Four Kings, an incredibly rare book. Uncle Oberyn had gifted a three-headed dragon brooch for Rhaenys and a direwolf brooch for Arthos. Aunt Daenerys had gifted a diamond necklace with a ruby-encrusted dragon head as the centerpiece. Aegon had gifted a dagger with a dragon's head on the pommel and two more dragon heads on the crossguard. Mother had gifted a bracelet with a three-headed dragon breathing fire on it, rubies for the fire and black pearls for the dragon, which she said was gifted to her by Grandmother Rolla when she married Father. Arianne, Quentyn, Tristan, Oberyn, Nymeria, Tyen and Sarilla had gifted a few Dornish dresses which Arianne had salaciously said I had sewn myself before winking at Rhaenys. "Of course you did, Ari." Uncle Eddard and Aunt Ashura had gifted a pair of riding saddles, with dragons and direwolves engraved on the leather. Deanna had gifted a cloak of a pure white winter bear pelt for a cloak, which she proudly said hunted it myself in the haunted forest. Theon had gifted an ironwood bow all of the way from House Forrester's seat of Ironrath. Elayna, Serena and Arya had gifted a silver direwolf engraved bracelet like Arianne's one of a snake. Ulrich, Brandon and Rickon had gifted a large escutcheon, near as tall as Arya, which they said be a true test of your strength, brother. Gifts from the Bannermen of the North, Dawn and beyond the wall ranged from jewelry, books, clothing, goblets, weapons and armor until Mance Rayder. Mance Rayder had brought a large crate saying took long time to bring this to Winterfell from my new home of Frostford. "What is it, Lord Rayder?" asked Rhaenys. "Oh, a gift I'm sure would be very welcome for the Starks of Winterfell, Princess," he replied. The crate was opened and inside was a frightening sight. Many guests not of the north shrieked at the sight of an enormous direwolf, one almost as large as a horse. "This is Alba. She is named for the old tongue word for hope. Which House Stark gave the free folk during the war, including your brother Aegon, Princess. And so, I thought it right that House Stark should have a direwolf in Winterfell." Rhaenys held her breath until she realized that the direwolf, Alba, was calm and the only hostile action she had done was steal an entire roasted chicken from the high table. The mood was lightened by this when all guests laughed at Elba's theft. "Did you bring her here to steal food, Lord Raider?" asked Athos. "No, young Stark. If you look close at her belly, do you notice anything?" Rhaenys and Athos looked down and saw how enlarged her belly was. "She's carrying wolf cubs," said Athos. "Be interesting if a pack of Starks had their own pack of direwolves," remarked the former king beyond the wall with a chuckle. Algirdas 3. "Uncle, Summerhall is so beautiful," Shireen commented as she rode with Algirdas and inspected the castle that was once a summer estate for House Targaryen and often awarded to second sons of Targaryen kings. "Yes, even in its ruined state, it truly is magnificent," Algirdas said proudly as they came back to the main gate, where banners were being set up, a black flag with a charging yellow stag and a purple thunderstorm in the background. "House Baratheon of Summerhall sigil?" asked Shireen. "Yes. I did talk with your Uncle Robert about creating my own house and having its own name. Otherwise there are just too many Baratheons in the world," replied Algirdas. "And what did Uncle Robert say?" she asked. "He'd think about it. But right now, my new and established house may have a place to call home, but I have almost no funds," he explained. "No funds?" asked Shireen. "Yes. What little gold I did have, I spent putting up my banners and clearing the rubble and ruins inside the main part of the castle itself. But there is still so much to be cleared out. I'd need a king's ransom to clear it all and hire servants and guardsmen," he replied. "Why not ask for gold from Uncle Robert?" "He is the king," said Shireen. "Uncle Robert is many things, but a wealthy man, he is not. He spends exorbitant amounts of coin on great feasts, tourneys, food, wine and whores. And his master of coin, is a vulture, whom I would prefer to stay far away from," said Algirdas. "Why? Who is he?" asked Shireen. "Lord Petyr Baelish, a childhood friend of your mother's," he explained. "Well, if he is an old friend of mother's, surely he would be glad to help," suggested Shireen. "You would think that. However, he is a man who owns most of the brothels in King's Landing. Several of your cousins were born in them," Algirdas explained. "Uncle Robert is a strange man," Shireen commented. Algirdas laughed. "He is. But if you met his wife, you would see why. Your Aunt Cersei may be one of the most beautiful women in the world, but she is cruel and makes my blood boil when she talks of how superior she thinks House Lannister is to all other houses," he replied. "So, what will you do to afford the necessary costs, uncle?" asked Shireen. "I've been giving some serious thought to becoming a sellsword. Not for the rest of my life. Just to make enough coin to afford all that is needed," Algirdas replied. "A sellsword?" Shireen asked. "I know. I can just imagine your father saying how I would bring shame to House Baratheon if I did that. House Baratheon is already disgraced by what Uncle Robert does to pass the time," as King Shireen commented. "Amongst other things. But, Shiri, the main reason why I asked you to come here, was I had a proposal to offer," he said. "What do you mean, uncle?" she asked. "Like I said, I just want to be a sellsword for long enough that I can make enough coin to provide for Summerhall and pretty the whole place up. Maybe even have a town and a few villages built in the surrounding lands. But, I need someone I trust to ensure it is all being done properly and for them to not run away with what coin I send," Algirdas explained. Shireen stopped her horse. "You want me to run things here, uncle? To ensure all is being done to the way you want it?" she asked. "I know this seems like an enormous task. But, I wouldn't ask of it you if I didn't think you could do it or if I could trust you. You're excelling in all of your lessons with Maester Cressen and this could be brilliant for you. On the day that you wed and become lady of some house, you will have this experience in restoring Summerhall to its former glory. And I would always give you a share of whatever coin I make." Shireen looked from Summerhall and then back to Algirdas before looking at Summerhall again. "Mother would think that I should be doing more lessons," she replied. "You've done all the lessons you need to do. You are 5 and 10, you are a woman ready to be a lady. I understand if you don't want to do this." "No. I'll do it, uncle," she replied, facing him again. "Truly?" "Yes, uncle. But the shares you send me better be plentiful," she replied. "I'll send you 1/5 of whatever shares I make and that is a promise," he said before extending his hand. She shook his hand. "Now, who tells mother?" "I will." Just as soon as I make preparations for my sellsword company. Sellsword company. Not only do you want to be a sellsword, you want to command your own company? Shireen asked incredulously. Well, if I am to do this, I should make the best of it and choose for whom I fight and whom I go to battle against, he replied. Chapter 9, Sadness in the Summer Isles. Chapter text. Bellanora I. This has become an age of Valyrian warlords creating kingdoms out of the land's peaceful people, said Jellaro as he and Bellanora looked out from the balcony of her family's estate and onto the construction site of Aegon Rugaria's palace, which he had already named Dragonspire. Bellanora turned to her friend and asked, but what is there that we can do? Rugaria has 20,000 men and is a battle-hardened warlord. Though, he does at least have no dragons like Aegon the Conqueror. We could hire a sellsword army from Essos. We could all send gold to Essos and hire the Golden Company or the Second Sons to come and throw out this invader from our lands, said Jellaro. But before Bellanora could reply, she heard the voices of mother and father behind her. Are you going to spend all day looking out at that Valyrian tyrant's palace? Mother asked. I do it to remind myself that our way of life is being ended by some foreigner whom now thinks himself our lord and master. The scum is desecrating our temples and mocking the gods. If we do not do something, he will end our way of life, as our ancestors have lived for thousands of years, said Jellaro. He has 20,000 men in Wallano alone. And houses Khokwa, Rolan, Jello and Sarku have all sworn fealty to him. My spies in Umbaru have told me, said father. Fucking traitors. The Summer Isles haven't been united into one country ever since the Slavers' Wars, and before that, the Years of Shame. This should be a good thing, to end the wars and the exiling of noble families and houses. And yet, when foreigners who know nothing of us and our way of life and think that their ways are the only ones which matter, that is when we must do something. So what are we to do? Murder Rugaria? Asked Bellanora. No, my dear. He is one man. And he is of a noble family from all the way in lies, and they send him resources, coin and men whenever he needs it. If we were to kill him, another of his family would come and take his place, said mother. And there's no telling what they would do to avenge him. Do you remember when Balaras Chokyu challenged him to a duel? He cut him down, slaughtered his family and gifted his family's estate to one of his generals, said father. It had been a year since the Summer Isles had been conquered by Aegon Rugaria, a Lysan Valyrian warlord, and since then, rather than embrace the traditions and culture of his conquered subjects as Aegon the Conqueror had done in West Eos, he was then forcing his own laws and culture onto the Summer Isles. And now, to ensure his authority was never questioned, he was having a great palace built in Lotus Point, the largest city in the Summer Isles. Gods, save our lands and our people. This cannot be our fate, to be so subjugated by a foreigner whom hates us and hates our ways of life, Bellanora thought as she had gone to her chambers and prayed to the gods for help. Only a few moons before Rugaria had invaded, Bellanora had returned home from the Temple of Love in Lotus Point, the largest of all such temples in the Summer Isles. But now, the temples were being desecrated and the worship of their gods was being outlawed, and the only gods whom Rugaria would be permit to be worshipped were the Valyrian dragon gods. What if Jellaro is right? What if the way to free us from Rugaria's tyranny is to send for a sellsword army? But what if Rugaria pays them more than we could offer? Bellanora cried as she lay in bed, wondering how the world could come to this and that her lands and her people were being subjugated like this. Robar I. Gods, this is boring, Robar thought as his squire, Galadon Grafton, took off his breastplate. There was I thinking that with Harold away to Winterfell, I might actually win this tourney and that it would all feel glorious. But Robar was bored. He had had enough of tourneys and jousts and irritated with annoying shows of chivalry and honor to try and impress Vale ladies or ladies of visiting kingdoms. I need to do something. I need to fight in a war. Waymar had the right of it, to join the Night's Watch. Though I don't like the cold of northern winters from all my time with father visiting Winterfell, I need to do something. Fine jousting out there, my son, father said with a proud smile as he entered Robar's tent. Thank you, father. Just fortunate that Harold wasn't here, Robar replied as Galadon placed his gauntlets and greaves aside. But, I sense that you're disappointed. Father asked. No, not disappointed, father. Just eager for something to do that doesn't include riding in tourneys and trying to impress ladies as many knights do, Robar replied as Ander joined them. brother. When did you get back? Robar asked as he stood up to hug his older brother and heir to Runestone. Just now. Harold was upset to have missed the tourney and to knock you flat down on your ass, Robar Ander said with a grin before patting his shoulder. Come on, Ander, give your brother some time to settle down. He just won a tourney for the first time in 5 years, said father. Ever since Harold started winning them all, Robar thought. Maybe if Harold starts traveling around the Crown Lands, Riverlands and Reach in search of tourneys and maybe even cross lances with Loras Tyrell, then maybe you can win all of the tourneys at home in the Vale, Ander suggested. Did you see Waymar whilst you were in Winterfell? Asked Robar. No. But I did get a raven from him soon after we arrived for the wedding. He said that now the Night's Watch has been reformed to deal with bandits and broken men across the 7 kingdoms and shall have a castle and a presence in each kingdom. He has been named second in command of the Night's Watch force in the Vale, Ander explained. Good lad. I shall look forward to seeing him and hearing all about it when he arrives back home in the Vale, father said with a proud nod. What castle will they get in the Vale? Asked Robar. It'd have to be a ruined one and with no lord ruling it, or a ruined castle on the lands of a lord whom has no wish to keep it, said father. Do we return home to Runestone soon, father? Asked Ander. We do. Now that the tourney here in Iron Oaks is ended, we can return home and prepare to greet your brother when he comes. And await the wedding of the heir to the Vale to one of the last Targaryens, father replied. One of the 4 last Targaryens, being married to the heir to the Vale, Robar thought. Cousin Myrandar, Zilla and just about every beautiful maiden girl of the Vale was broken-hearted when they heard the news that Harold is being wed to Daenerys Targaryen. It'll be interesting to see what she is like and if she has any of the madness that plagued her father or her brother. Just as long as that madness doesn't pass on into House Arryn. But, Robar, you shouldn't have to worry about having a lack of adventure or being bored in tourneys such as this, said father. Why not, father? Asked Ander. This morning, I heard a rumor from our host, Lady Waynwood. The hill tribes are assembling and it seems that they are gathering into an army, said father. The hill tribes. Putting aside all of their differences and gathering into an army. That's never happened before in all history of the Vale, so why is it happening now? Do we know whom leads them, father? Asked Ander. As I said, it was a mere rumor from Lady Waynwood's mouth. That, and the name Doralf, he replied. Chapter 10, The First Contract. Chapter Text. Algirdas 4. Algirdas was summoned to the palace of Prince Trigger Oromolin of Pentos, and was eager to make a reputation as a sellsword, now that he had come to Pentos with a sellsword force of 1,000 men, including his nephews Tymond Hill, Gendry, Tolars and Robin Waters, Mark Rivers, Tor Owen Pike, and Edric Storm. Tymond was the child of Robert and Alanna Sport, who Robert had taken a fancy to when visiting Casterly Rock soon after his wedding to Cersei. Mark was the son of a free girl Robert met during a tourney in Riverrun. Robin and Gendry were sons of small folk women from King's Landing. Tor Owen was the son of an Iron Islander girl, whose father was formerly a shipwright in King's Landing. Edric was the son of a handmaiden to a Florent lady. And Tolars was the son of the famous Summer Isles whore, Shatea, when she had lain with Robert, soon after arriving in King's Landing for the first time in the last days of the rebellion. Of all of them, whilst Gendry was the strongest, he preferred being a blacksmith as opposed to a warrior or a knight. Edric and Mark both had an education due to their mothers being of noble background. Tor Owen was the one whom was most like his father, in that he enjoyed drinking, fighting and whoring. Tymond, Mark, Edric and Tolars were all eager to become knights and to make a reputation as knights. Tolars even spoke of entering the Kingsguard one day. Whereas Robin and Tor Owen wanted nothing more than a life of adventure, fighting, feasting and whoring. And so, he brought Tolars, Tymond, Edric, Mark, Tor Owen and Robin with him when they arrived at the prince's palace. What a palace! Not even the Red Keep can compare with this, Robin exclaimed as they looked at the marble floors, brick columns with gold and gemstones engraved in each of them. Fancy being Prince of Pentos, brother. I have heard it said that once a year, the prince carries out a ritual where he fucks 2 maidens. The Pentoshi believe that this ensures that they remain prosperous, Edric said. Sounds good. It'd be better to be Prince of Pentos than being King of the 7 Kingdoms, Tor Owen muttered. I don't think so. I heard from a few Pentoshi tavern keepers that whilst the prince does have a fine life, if Pentos suffers a famine or loses a war, the small folk place all blame on the prince and have every right to kill the poor cunt, explained Edric. Huh. Well, that's not nice, said Torwin. Still think being Prince of Pentos sounds nicer than being King of the Seven Kingdoms, brother. Tolas asked with his arm around Torwin's back. Lads, quiet. The prince comes, said Algirdas. The prince was a large and overweight man, reminding him of Robert. But not even Robert wore the clothes that this prince wore. He wore fancy Eastern clothing with gemstones and gold imagery on it. There was even Valerian Glyphs written all in gold on his sleeves. Seems like the sort of thing that Circe might wear, Algirdas thought with a raised brow. You stand in the presence of his grace, Trigger, Prince of Pentos and Lord of the greatest of all free cities, said a herald standing by his prince's side. Algirdas bowed before him, his actions were mirrored by his nephews. Your Grace, I, Lord Algirdas Baratheon, am proud to answer your invitation and to come personally to your wondrous palace, Algirdas said. Welcome to Pentos, Lord Baratheon. I trust that you have been well received here in Pentos. We have, Your Grace. It truly is a beautiful city, certainly more so than the capital of Westeros, said Algirdas. Truly. Pentos is as beautiful as King's Landing, asked the prince. Well, truthfully, Your Grace, King's Landing stinks from there being a lack of sewers and the city being far too populated than the city's government can manage, Algirdas replied. Yet another reason why I am proud to be of Pentos, said the prince with a grin. But, to business. I am sure that you are aware that war has broken out with our neighboring city of Braavos, he said. The news has carried throughout the city, Your Grace, Algirdas replied with a nod. Pentos, in the past, has never won a great victory against Braavos. I intend to change that, which is why I have been preparing for the eventuality of war. Braavos marches an army of 35,000 men on Pentos. Pentos commands near 30,000. However, my spies have learned that a small Braavosi army of 3,000 marches now toward the Velvet Mountains to secure the mountains for when their great army comes to attack. I want to hire you and Storm Company to crush them and prevent them from securing the Velvet Mountains. I am willing to offer 50,000 Jelessas. Algirdas bowed his head and thought about this. We have 1,000 men, mostly sellswords and lads eager for glory, gold and adventure. But, against a Braavosi army 3 times our number. We'll have to be clever about this, and fight on our terms, not on theirs. We'll be glad to take this contract, Your Grace, Algirdas replied. Leaving the prince's palace with the gold, they headed back to their campsite on the outskirts of the city. What's a Jelessa, uncle? Asked Tymund. It comes from Valerian, for gold coin. And if our treasurer, Herodas, speaks true, then 50,000 Jelessas would be worth 25,000 gold dragons, said Algirdas. Who decides the worth of a country's currency, uncle? Asked Edric. The Iron Bank of Braavos. Algirdas turned around to see Storm Company's paymaster and treasurer, a Pentoshi whom used to work at the Iron Bank for 5 years, Herodas Parion. How much did the prince pay us, my lord? Asked Herodas. 50,000. Will that be good? Asked Algirdas. It should be, said Herodas with a nod as the servants whom came with the carts of gold unloaded the chests from them, drawing a lot of excitement from all men of Storm Company. So, what's the contract? Asked Bronn, Algirdas' second in command, as he came swaggering over. The Braavosi march an army towards the Velvet Mountains, 3,000 men. To prepare for when the main Braavosi army marches on Pentos, Algirdas explained. 3,000 men. We have 1,000 men. We'll be fucked before we can even get to those mountains, said Herodas. No. Not if we play this by our own rules and not theirs, said Algirdas. What rules are these, uncle? Asked Mark. The rules to win, said Bronn. Ashura 3. All in Winterfell were glad to see the last of Lork and Swigert, both of whom were regarded with dislike everywhere they went. But with Artos and Rhaenys now married, Ashura was happy. For years when they were children, Ashura and Elia talked about one day sharing a grandchild, and now Ashura's eldest son was wed to Rhaenys, whom Ashura had known since she was born. It was a wonderful wedding and Ashura was glad of the opportunity to see her old friends from Dorne and to see her brother Aron, his only son Edric, and their sister Illyria, newly married to Lord Beric Dondarrion. A week after the festivities of the wedding, Ashura finished breakfast with her family and had gone to Ned's Solar, where she found him looking at a letter. "Ned, is all well?" she asked as she walked behind him and rubbed his shoulders. Ash. All is well," he said with a beaming smile as she sat down next to him and put her arm around his shoulder. He held up the letter and passed it to her. "To Lord Eddard of House Stark. All is complete beyond the wall, my lord. The settlements of your new bannermen are complete. The free folk, though hard and unfamiliar to our customs, have shown that they are indeed quick to adapt. The mammoths that we've brought have sped construction considerably of the castles. The castles will never be as grand or as magnificent as the great keep of Winterfell, it is true. They look more akin to somewhere such as Last Hearth. We now await your reply from King's Landing for consent to formally establish the new noble houses of the north. Yours sincerely, Sir Wendell of House Marndale." "Sir Wendell has indeed been busy," Ashura commented. He has. And to great effect. Now, there should be peace between the southern half of the north and the northern half. Though it will take time to heal wounds between the peoples, the fact that we fought a common enemy together, proves that it is not impossible to make friends with them," said Ned. Ned turned to her and asked, "And how is Mance Rayder's gift adapting to life in Winterfell?" "Farlin said that she is close to giving birth. Either tomorrow or the day after," said Ashura. "Direwolf cubs, growing up here alongside our children. Who would have thought?" Ned asked. "It's symbolic. It's good that Starks have direwolves, when our sigil is a direwolf," she said. Ned said with a nod before standing up and holding Ashura's hand. They walked together to the balcony overlooking the courtyard, where Brandon, Deanna and Ulrich were teaching Rickon how to fight whilst Arya was learning from Sir Roderick. "Now that Artos is wed, the northern lords will look to us to marry off our children to theirs," Ashura said. "Deanna has shown interest in marrying Domeric Bolton," Ned commented. "And during the wedding dance, I noticed Serena dancing numerous times with the Karstark brothers," Ashura added. "Serena and the Karstark brothers. The youngest, Torren, is nearly 2 years older than she is and, like all Karstarks, enjoys nothing more than to fight, feast and drink," said Ned. "It would be good for relations with the Karstarks. Some of them dislike how we have welcomed the free folk south of the wall. A marriage with House Stark may help heal relations," Ashura pointed out. "But of course, we mention this to the children," said Ned. Of course, said Ashura. "I will never marry off my children into a loveless marriage and with someone they do not love. Not after what happened between Elia and fucking Rhaegar. The only good things to happen from their marriage were Rhaenys and Aegon." Ashura saw Elia talking with Daenerys and trying to comfort her with the thought of leaving home and marrying Harold Arryn. During the wedding, Ashura, Ned and Elia had met Harold Arryn, whom had come accompanied by his closest friends, Andor Royce, Albar Royce and Jasper Redfort. He seemed a good young man, handsome, proud and not overly boastful or one whom would do false acts of chivalry. But Ashura had heard from an old friend from the Vale, Lady Jennys of House Hunter, whom said that Harold had a bastard daughter, called Alis Stone, from a tavern wench. She questioned him of this when they met in Ned's Solar. "I heard a rumor, Sir Harold, that you have a base-born daughter. Is this true?" she asked. He sighed through his nose as he looked down at his hands resting on his knees briefly before looking back up. "Yes, that is true, my lady. Though I was drunk with wine and victory after winning my first tourney when I fathered her, I will never regret it. I love my little daughter and will until the day I die," he replied. "I admire your integrity, but my only concern is whether or not you are a good husband to Daenerys. If you are, then good. But if you are not, then I will do all I can to ensure that the two of you are never wed." Chapter 11, A Wedding in Highgarden. Chapter text. Artos 3. "It is good to see Winterfell again," said Artos as he and Rhaenys could see the heights of the Great Keep from where he, Rhaenys and Sir Jaime were riding at a gentle pace. "Though it was nice to see Jon and Val. Brandon is such an adorable little boy," Rhaenys said with a beaming smile. "Does it make you wonder what our children will look like?" asked Artos. "Our children will be beautiful, Artos. And I will love every last one of them, no matter what," Rhaenys replied before leaning in and kissing Artos. Same. Our children will be beautiful. Riding through the gates and into the great keep, Artois and Rhaenys were warmly greeted by mother, father and Aunt Elia. "How were Jon and Val?" asked father as they stepped inside the feasting hall. "Aye, they were good. Their wee boy is a handsome lad, just like his father. They named him Brandon," said Artois. Father beamed at hearing the name of his great-nephew. "And what's it like at Snowhelm?" Mother asked. "It's a fine place to call home. It's small, but Jon was meeting with artisans and builders to discuss building it larger," Artois replied. After eating with Rhaenys, Artois walked onto the training yard and saw Ulrich and Brandon sparring with Deanna and Aegon. Artois took his great sword with his right hand, and with his left hand he took his escutcheon, gifted to him on his wedding. "Aegon, how about a spar?" Artois asked. Aegon turned to face him and swung his sword around a few times. "Aye, good brother. Let's see how you fare," Aegon replied with a grin. Aegon struck down onto his escutcheon and Artois skillfully blocked it before swinging it across, almost disarming Aegon before striking down with his own sword. Aegon dodged the blow and sliced his sword across at his great shield and then again at his sword. Artois slammed his sword against Aegon's, pushing into his sword. The two pushed into each other with the other sword before Aegon broke the stalemate by slamming his sword onto Artois' shield. Artois let him thrust toward him, only to block it with his shield, and then he swung his shield against Aegon's sword. This time, Aegon was disarmed. "Next time, think about using a shield, or a second sword. You do have dark sister," Artois said before swinging across at Aegon. Aegon dodged the blow and took a handful of snow and threw it at Artois' face. Aegon used this to run towards his sword and grabbed it and swung powerfully at Artois' shield. Artois dropped his shield and faced Aegon, on equal terms and with no shields. Aegon sliced at him with an overhead slice and Artois blocked it and forced his sword across and smashed it down onto Aegon's sword. "No, Stark, I'll always fight with a great sword, never a long sword," Aegon said as their swords kissed again in midair. "Your mistake then, Targaryen," Artois replied before twisting around and slamming his sword onto Aegon. Aegon just managed to block, but then he swung across at Artois, narrowly missing him. The two stood facing each other, waiting for the other to make the next move. "Artois." The two good brothers looked up to see Mother shouting at Artois from the entrance back inside the great keep. "It's Rhaenys. Come quickly," she shouted. "What's going on? Is Rhaenys all right?" Artois threw down his sword, as did Aegon, and they ran towards Mother, following her inside, and both sprinted upstairs into Maester Jellimund's solar. There, Artois panted as he looked at Rhaenys, sitting down next to Maester Jellimund's desk. "Rhaenys, my love, what's wrong?" Artois asked, running to her side. She beamed as she held his hand and then placed his hand on her belly. "You're going to be a father, Artois," she said before lifting his hand up and kissing it. "Truly?" he asked. "Gods, we were only talking about having beautiful children just this morning." He turned to Maester Jellimund. "Maester, do you know how long?" "Aye, my lord. I'd say 7 or 8 moons," he replied. Artois hugged Rhaenys before kissing her on the forehead and then on her lips. "I love you so much, Rhaenys. And we're going to have such a beautiful sons and daughters," he said. "Do you not mind whether it's a boy or a girl?" she asked. "No. Not at all," he replied before kissing her again. "Sister, it's too soon for me to be an uncle," Aegon said with a chuckle as he walked toward them and hugged Rhaenys. "Congratulations." "Thank you, brother. I hope that you will be spoiling your nephew or niece and teaching them how to fight as they grow up," asked Rhaenys. "Of course I will. Of course I will," said Aegon with a proud smile. Aunt Elia, Mother and Father joined them and Artois stood up and Aunt Elia walked to him. "I don't know why, but I feel too young to be a grandmother," she said. "That's because you are. But, you will have such beautiful grandchildren," Mother said. Rhaenys. "I know. I know, my beautiful little dragon," said Aunt Elia before hugging Rhaenys. "Willers I." Willers sat with Grandmother Olenna in her personal chambers which overlook the palatial keep's gardens. "What news is there from King's Landing?" asked Willers as he leant on his crutch whilst one of Grandmother's guards pulled a chair out for him beside Grandmother. "Not much, unfortunately. Left and right, go," said Grandmother. Her two guards nodded and muttered "Milady" before leaving. So, what news is there that we do know of? Asked Willers. Well, it's all going off in the north and the Vale. Rhaenys Targaryen is wed to Artos Stark, heir to Winterfell. And Daenerys Targaryen is to wed Harold Arryn, heir to the Eyrie, she replied. Rhaenys Targaryen wed to the heir to House Stark. I remember mother telling me how after Randyll Tarly defeated Robert Baratheon at Ashford, Mad King Aerys said that a royal marriage between Rhaenys and I was possible, once Storm's End had been taken. And not even after a year of starving the seat of House Baratheon, did the Targaryen dynasty fall. Will this in any way affect House Tyrell's influence or our plans for Margaery? Asked Willers. No. In fact, though this was by royal command, it may open up a possibility for House Tyrell to be allied with House Baratheon, in more ways than one, said Grandmother. Eddard Stark's isolation from his boyhood friend Robert helps in that regard, Willers added. Precisely. The Northerners have allied themselves to Dorne in recent years, no doubt in thanks to Eddard Stark being married to a Dornish woman, said Grandmother. And thanks to Laura's dalliances with Renly Baratheon, Robert Baratheon may be open to a marriage match between Prince Joffrey and Margaery, said Grandmother. Perhaps, though Robert's other brothers may think differently on that, said Willers. Stannis. Ha, the man is a bore whom never smiles, and there is no love lost between he and Robert. He may hate House Tyrell, but Robert will never listen to him, said Grandmother. It's not Stannis I worry about, Grandmother, at least not in this regard. It's the youngest of Robert's brothers. Algerdus, said Willers. Algerdus. Why do you worry about him? Asked Grandmother. He was a boy of 5 when the siege of Storm's End was lifted. He has made it no secret of how much he hates us for it. And, admittedly, I've been afraid of coming across him ever since I had met the former blacksmith to Storm's End, Donal Noye. He told me, before venturing to Castle Black, that he could describe the Baratheon brothers as though they were metals. He described Robert as steel, stronger than all others, but leave it on a rack for too long, and it will rust. Stannis, he called hard black iron, which breaks before it bends. Renly, he described as copper, the prettiest of metals, but useless in a fight. Grandmother smirked at these descriptions. And what did he describe Algerdus as? As Valyrian steel. Forever sharp, forever strong, and forever dangerous. Unyielding, and always leaves a mark wherever it goes. A blacksmith's words are hardly something to go by, said Grandmother. Perhaps not, but it's something we should consider when he now leads an army of sellswords in Essos, and they are called Storm Company. Given a few years when it increases in size, he could prove to be a threat to Highgarden and to House Tyrell, Willers said. Father would say that I'm being paranoid and that the Reach's armies number 100,000 in times of war. But I know that someone who hates a house as much as someone such as Algerdus Baratheon, will make him an incredibly dangerous foe. One whom would stop at nothing to take revenge on House Tyrell. Grandmother hummed before there was a knock on the door. Grandmother. Brother. Do come in, dear, said Grandmother with a beaming smile for Margaery as she entered. Margaery sat down next to Willers and looked up to Grandmother. We've just received a raven from one of my spies in King's Landing. Because of rifts between King Robert and his old and dear friend, Eddard Stark, he has considered marrying Prince Joffrey to Eddard Stark's eldest daughter, Lyanna. Margaery had been raised by father and grandmother to be one of the prettiest and most beautiful maidens in the realm, and to be a sharp and cunning weapon in House Tyrell's armory. Oh. Well, what do we know about Lyanna Stark? Not much, unfortunately. Stories say that she is a very beautiful young maiden. She is often referred to as the Star of the North. Having met her mother a long time ago, I'm inclined to believe those stories, said Grandmother. Ah yes, Ashera Dayne. The famous Star of Dawn, and one of the most beautiful women in the realm, whom fell for and married a grisly and hard northerner. Will she be a threat to our plans? Asked Margaery. Hopefully not, so long as Eddard Stark keeps himself and the North isolated from the South and not to bother himself with the intrigues of King's Landing, said Willers. Though Eddard Stark is a hard and ferocious man by all accounts, to scare King Robert, Tywin Lannister and dozens of nobles in the throne room with just his terrifying and thundering voice, Willers thought as he remembered the story from Uncle Baelor how he staunchly defended Elia Martell, Aegon, Rhaenys and Daenerys Targaryen, in spite of all that Mad King Aerys and Rhaegar had done to his own family. When there is next a great tourney in King's Landing, your brother Garland shall go to King's Landing alongside Laura's and see for themselves the situation in the capital and what sort of man the Crown Prince is and the best way to win his heart. Anything to gain an advantage over any other noble family that would bring their daughter to the capital to woo the Crown Prince, said Grandmother. Garland, you may bring the bride under your protection, said Septon Marlborough. Garland did just that, and he unfastened his own cloak, embroidered with the golden rose of House Tyrell. He unfastened Leonette's cloak with the sigil and colours of House Fossoet. With a warm and gentle smile, he wrapped his cloak around Leonette. My lords and ladies, we stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of husband and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever. Garland reached for Leonette's hands, and as they held, Septon Marlborough tied a ribbon around them. Let it be known that Garland Tyrell and Leonette Fossoet are one heart, one flesh and one soul. Cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder. Septon Marlborough then began to unravel the ribbon whilst Garland looked from the corner of his eye at mother, father, grandmother, Willers, Laura's and Margery seated in the front row watching the wedding with beaming smiles. In the sight of the seven, I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity. He turned from all gathered in the September and looked to Garland and Leonette. Look upon each other and say the words. Father. Smith. Warrior. Mother. Maiden. Crone. Stranger, they said together. I am hers and she is mine. From this day until the end of my days, said Garland. I am his and he is mine. From this day until the end of my days, said Leonette. Garland turned to his family, Leonette's family and all gathered nobility of the Reach. With this kiss, I pledge my love, said Garland before turning to Leonette. He leant in and kissed her. Gods, this is the best day of my life. I don't know why knights think that winning tourneys or being knighted is better than this. There is nothing better than to wed the love of your life. Whilst all gathered clapped and cheered for them, Garland and Leonette walked down the September together and back to the palatial keep for the wedding feast. There, lords and ladies from all around the Reach gifted them gifts, from jewelry and clothing for Leonette, to weapons and armor pieces for Garland, and finely made goblets and wine cups. But it was father's gift which had truly taken Garland by surprise. Garland, my dear boy, it makes me so happy to see you so happy and to be wed to such a lovely girl as Leonette, father said proudly. You are too kind, Lord Tyrell, said Leonette. Nonsense, my dear. But, I would be honored if you were to just refer to me as your good father, said father with a beaming smile before he kissed Leonette's hand. I would consider it an honor to do such a thing and to be wed into your noble house, said Leonette. Well, yes and no, said father. What? Father, what do you mean? Asked Garland. Father drew a piece of parchment from his belt and passed it to Garland. My wedding gift to you both, said father with a beaming smile. By the gods. Garland couldn't quite believe what he was reading as he laid out on the high table for he and Leonette to read it. Leonette gasped as she read it. A deed of lordship. To be Lord of Whitegrove. Signed by the king. Gods. Garland looked back up at father after he had finished reading it. Father. I'm at a loss for words, Garland tried to say. Say none, my boy. None are needed. Just promise that the two of you will be happy at Whitegrove and that you'll visit your old father and dear mother at Highgarden often and that you'll introduce us to our future grandchildren, said father with a proud smile. Of course, father, said Garland as he stood up before leaning across the table and hugging father. Whilst Garland sat back down and reread the deed of lordship, he looked back up at father, whom was talking with grandmother and with Willers. Poor Willers. He is the heir to Highgarden and yet no one wishes to wed him. He is one of the sweetest and kindest men I've ever met. He deserves to be married to a woman such as that. The day after the wedding, Garland was invited by father, mother, Willers and grandmother to father's solar. Garland was allowed inside by both of grandmother's guards, whom she had named left and right. You sent for me? Garland asked when he saw his parents. Yes, come, Garland, said mother. Garland sat beside Willers whilst father, mother and grandmother were sat behind father's desk. Is there a problem? Asked Garland. No, none at all, my dear boy. But, for House Tyrell's future standing with the crown, we have made the decision to advance our plans with Margery, said father. Father, you know how much I hate the Game of Thrones. No good ever comes of it. In the end, the ones it affects most are the innocent small folk whom get caught in the middle of struggles of power between warring houses and all caused by intrigue. Willers and your grandmother have come up with a plan, which you are a part of, Garland said. Mother. What plan? But, you should know that I have no head for intrigues or for the game, said Garland. No, fear not. We know that, Garland. This is merely just a scouting mission, if you like, said Father. Trust Father to word statements as though this was a war, Garland thought with a smirk. Knowing full well King Robert's appetites for tourneys, he will undoubtedly host a grand one at King's Landing, not some petty one. And when he does, every noble vulture in Westeros will have their eyes on the capital and on the Crown Prince. We will need you to see if Margaery will have any competition and what the situation is in the Red Keep and anyone we should beware of. Nothing serious, you understand. Merely just seeing things the way things are, said Willers. Chapter 12, A Vision or a Dream. Chapter text. Aegon 3. Whilst all of the Great Keep was excited for the birth of Artos and Rhaenys' first child, Aegon had overheard Uncle Eddard and Aunt Ashera talking of encouraging the rest of their children to marry with the children of northern nobility, in particular, Ulrich, whom was soon to be named Lord of Moat Cailin. Brandon, though was offered the lordship of Wolf's Den, had declined, saying that he wanted to one day be a knight of the Kingsguard. And so, Rickon, at the age of 9, was told that he would one day be Lord of Wolf's Den. Lord Marndale would want a marriage between Rickon and one of his granddaughters when he does become Lord of Wolf's Den, Uncle Eddard told Aunt Ashera. I've met both girls and they are both delightful little ladies. It would have to be Wyler, the youngest of the two, for Winifred is to one day be Lady of White Harbour, said Aunt Ashera. Often unintentionally, Aegon overheard what was being said by others, because he had good hearing and because he was quiet. But what does that mean for me? Rhaenys will one day be Lady of Winterfell and Aunt Daenerys is soon to wed Harold Arryn and will one day be Lady of the Eyrie. Am I destined to remain in Winterfell forever? But whilst Aegon was uncertain about his future, he was also sad by the idea that Lyanna would one day wed the heir to a northern house, or even the heir to a Lord Paramountcy. Aegon had been in love with Lyanna for as long as he could remember, and loved that she was always so kind and caring toward him and that she knew things about him that no one had ever noticed about him. When he was a boy and small folk around Winterfell or the children of northern houses would berate and belittle him for his Targaryen heritage, Lyanna was one of the few people whom was always kind to him and never treated him as though he was an outsider. Outside of his own family and his Stark friends and Theon, Lyanna was one of the few people that he absolutely trusted. Aegon walked to Mother's chambers, just after spending a few hours on the training yard alongside Artos. He saw Mother was making a prayer wheel. Mother, said Artos. She looked up and beamed when she saw Aegon. Hello, Aegon. Come and sit, she gestured to her bed before she resumed with making the prayer wheel. Aegon did as he was invited and sat next to her. Is that for Rhaenys or her child? For Rhaenys. Mothers make these only for their children, so sadly not for their grandchildren, said Mother before she gently put it down on her bedside table. But it is of the old gods, to make those, said Aegon. It is. But the old gods have been good to us since we came to Winterfell. I prayed to the Seven many times during the rebellion, for me, for you and for your sister to be safe. When they came to the Red Keep that day, I was so scared, until Ned saved us. After saving us, I prayed to the old gods in the Red Keep's Godswood, and after praying there, Ned protected us and brought us safely to Winterfell and has kept us safe ever since. Though this isn't Sunspear or King's Landing, I am happy here, with you and your sister, said Mother as she reached for Aegon and gently rubbed his back. Is everything all right, Aegon? She asked as she placed the prayer wheel down. Aegon shyly shook his head, afraid to say the words out loud he had come to tell her. What is it? She asked with worry. I love Lyanna. I've been in love with her for years and I cannot stop thinking about her, Aegon explained, blushing as he said it. Oh, Aegon, she said before hugging him. You make it seem like this is a good thing. How is it when she's the most beautiful maiden lady of the north and will soon have heirs to northern houses fighting for her hand? Does she know? Mother asked. No, I just don't know what sort of future there would be for us if there was a chance we wed, said Aegon. Aegon, there is more to life than ruling anything from a house to a keep or even a castle. There is love and there is family, said Mother. If Robert Baratheon had his way, he would have me killed so that no more Targaryens can threaten his perfect reign, Aegon pointed out sulkily. Ned has kept us safe here for when you were as young as one. Nothing bad will happen to you, I promise, said Elia before she pulled him in for a hug. Everything will be all right, Aegon. I promise, she whispered. I know, Mother. I know, Aegon whispered back. Aegon left the Great Keep and decided to go to the Staggering Stark for dinner, and when he arrived there, he was glad to see Griff seated at a table. Didn't think you'd still be here, Griff, Aegon said as he walked toward him. Griff looked up at him and smiled as Aegon sat down with his platter of roasted lamb and fish and a tankard of mead. Ah, Winterfell has become an interesting place as of late. With the last of the Targaryens here, said Griff. I prefer it when there's no interesting things taking place, said Aegon. Why is that? I like the peace and quiet, shrugged Aegon before he drank from his tankard. That's a nice sword you've got there. What is it? Griff suddenly asked. Aegon looked down at his side and saw that he had noticed Blackfyr. It's called Blackfyr, the sword of my family and a little later of House Blackfyr, replied Aegon. Whatever he was expecting him to say, it wasn't that. Blackfyr. How do you have that? He asked. I was gifted it, by a mysterious man far north of the wall. He gave it to me when we were north of the wall and fighting the wildlings and, all such, Aegon replied. He wouldn't believe me if I told him it was Brynden Rivers. Gods, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't met him with my own eyes. I pray that Uncle Brynden has found peace. Do you have Dark Sister also? He asked. As a matter of fact, I do. But Blackfyr, I prefer to use that. I like to fight with a great sword as opposed to a longsword and a shield, replied Aegon. So, what do you do with Dark Sister? He asked. Well, in the battles I've fought, I kept it as a secondary weapon, Aegon replied. Have you fought in many battles? 10. After finishing lunch, Aegon said goodbye to Griff. How much longer do you plan on staying in Winterfell? We'll see. If there is something that's worth my interest anywhere else in Westeros, replied Griff. Aegon left to return to the Great Keep and walked to the Godswood. He sat in front of the Heart Tree, where Uncle Ned would often sit for praying and for the peace and quiet. He looked at the face on the Heart Tree and remembered Rhaenys telling him how when she was 5, she read a book of funny poems to it to try and make the face smile. When he returned to the Great Keep, he climbed into bed, but as he did so, he felt his mind drift to the Godswood. Where am I? Aegon looked around and found himself back in the Godswood. Aegon. He turned around and looked for who said that. Standing next to the Heart Tree was a man with long and flowing silver hair and violet eyes like his own. He wore a doublet with the sigil of House Targaryen on it. His face was beautifully handsome, though his saddened face brightened when he faced Aegon. He was tall, almost as tall as Artos. His long and elegant fingers were bent, as though they were used to playing an instrument. Son. Father, asked Aegon. He nodded with a saddened smile. Aegon looked around and at the Godswood. Why are you here? Aegon demanded. I wanted to speak to you. To see you in person. To see the man you had become, he replied, walking toward him, his hand extended toward Aegon. Aegon backed away. Well, now you've seen me. The son you abandoned with just one Kingsguard, whom was my age if not younger, when you told him to protect Mother, Rhaenys and I. All whilst you had 3 of the best Kingsguard hold a girl younger than Aunt Daenerys against her will. Father frowned and his amethyst violet eyes glistened when Aegon spoke. I never held her against her will. She loved me, he said. Did you love her? Did you love Mother? Did you love Rhaenys? Did you love me? Or were we all just pawns in the fucking prophecies you were so obsessed with and didn't give a fuck about the fate of Westeros? I never wanted the rebellion to happen or for our family to be overthrown. Well, that's your fucking fault for not thinking about the consequences of your fucking actions. If she did love you and went with you willingly, why the fuck did you not tell her to send letters to her family and let them know she was safe? No one forced you to take Lyanna Stark. You did that, willingly. No one forced you to humiliate Mother in front of the realm again and again and again. You did that, willingly. And you left Mother, Rhaenys and I with only Jaime Lannister, who slew your fucking mad father rather than protect us from Tywin Lannister. Had it not been for the brother of the girl you wanted to use as a broodmare for your fucking beloved prophecy, we would all have been butchered. I thought that I was saving the world. Was that the excuse you were telling yourself before you went to sleep each night? That it was all for the realm? That it would take 3 dragons to save the world? A Visenya to join your Aegon and Rhaenys? Was any of this worth it, Father? Father calmed down when he saw how Aegon stood unrelentingly and without fault or tears, whilst he was crying. I'm proud of you, Aegon. I thought that I was the prince that was promised. But it was always you. You saved the world from the monsters in the prophecies you speak so horribly of. And let me guess, if you were king, you would have come to the North's help when the armies of the dead marched on the wall. Or would have you been obsessed with reading more prophecies that you and all scholars of the world barely understand? You talk like a northerner. That's because I am one, said Aegon. No. You are a Targaryen. You will always be a Targaryen, said Father. I am a Targaryen, but I am of the North. Why would I want to have anything to do with the fucking South when they all wish me, Rhaenys, Aunt Daenerys and Mother dead, when we've never done a fucking thing to harm them? No Southerner stood by Uncle Ned when Robert Baratheon wanted to kill me. He alone stood his ground and protected us from the Baratheons and Lannisters. And all you can talk about is how you are proud of me. You are my son, Aegon. You may hate me now, but I will always love you. I know I did wrong in how I approached the prophecy of the Long Night. But I did what I thought was right. If I could change it all, I would. And I would always have been by your mother's side. I'm sure she would feel honored to hear that from you, you lying and unfaithful cunt, Aegon snapped before turning around. Be wary, Aegon, my son. Another is coming. Aegon gasped as he woke up. What the fuck? What the fuck was that? Was that truly Father? Was he always that fucking stupid? Aegon reached for his bedside table and drank from his pitcher of water. Gods, I needed that. But, why now? Why was he haunting my dreams now? Ashura 4. It had been a year since the end of the War of the Long Night. And since then, Ashura and Ned had received ravens from beyond the wall, that all was well and that the castles, towns and ports had been completed and that dirt and rock roads had been built to connect them to each other and to the wall. Though the castles built were little more than motte and baileys of wood and stone, the free folk all knew them to be safer and warmer than living in tents in cold forests and mountains or even in caves. As well as building these settlements, when visiting White Harbor with Ned, they had met Lord Wyman Mondaly, whom introduced them to a Yitish merchant whom sold seeds for a Yitish food capable of growing in even the coldest of climates, called rice. Since first using it in glass gardens built beyond the wall, there was an abundance of rice for the free folk living north of the wall, whom had previously survived on nothing but meat from hunted animals. But returning home to Winterfell after a visit to the settlements of Frostford, Meads Meadow, Thundercrest, Icehaven, Snowspurth, Oakenhall, Bronzecliff, Winter's Moot and Brandyton, Ashura was glad to see Ned was proud and happy that the North would never again fear about wildling raids or the dead rising to trouble the living. How is everything beyond the wall, my love? Asked Ashura. All is good. It'll be a long time before the most hardy and most stubborn free folk move beyond the living outside and living as nomads. But, this is a start from which we can improve, Ned replied. Then he turned to face Ashura with a beaming smile. The rice they've been growing has been saving hundreds of lives who have been surviving on meat for all of their lives, he said. Good. And with access to the sea and merchant ships sailing that far north, they will have plentiful access to good food from as far south as the Reach. Now, how has it been here? How are the children faring with their new charges? He asked as he sat down with her. Alba had given birth to 8 direwolf cubs, and each of their children had adopted one. Artos had named his Grey Wind. Lyanna had named hers Lady. Brandon named his Summer. Deanna named hers Sharp. Ulrich named his Frostclaw. Serena named hers Silver. Arya named hers Nymeria. Rickon named his Shaggy-Dog. Artos, Brandon, Deanna and Ulrich take theirs hunting. Lyanna and Serena take them for walks in the Wolfswood with Rhaenys and Daenerys. Arya gets up to all kinds of mischief with Nymeria. and Rakan and Shagidog are often exploring around the first keep and the crypts. Ned beamed as he heard about their children. Ashura lay her head down on Ned's lap whilst he told her about his meetings with various free folk magners. Tormund Giantsbane wasn't satisfied with the walls on his home of Mead's Meadow until it was designed as such that he wasn't able to climb it personally, Ned reminisced. Ashura chuckled and asked, is he a skilled climber, Tormund Giantsbane? Oh, he's climbed the wall 50 times and once climbed it from top to bottom with myself at the top just to prove it, Ned replied. Have we had any ravens since I have been gone? Ned asked. Well, we have had a few. Since the Valyrian roads have been completed, a few lords paramount have asked for the roads to be built in their homelands, said Ashura.